Chapter 1385. Yusuji now stood at the peak of the mountain and watched the battle from afar with a complicated look in her eyes. In order to obtain strength, she had contracted Great Sky Fiend and indeed obtained extremely powerful strength in a very short period of time. For a period of time, Yusuji now even believed that she would become the mainstream and pioneer of humanity's future. However, things didn't seem to develop in the direction she had expected. Although many humans had chosen to contract guardians and become contractors, guardians didn't become the mainstream of humanity. However, guardians didn't become the mainstream of humanity. The Holy Spirit would advance through spirit casting. Hui Haifeng had created the mythical liquid. There were also humans like Human Emperor and King of Thieves who had advanced to the mythical stage. As no one had seen Human Emperor and Thief King's true faces, it was impossible to determine if they had used spirit casting or mythical fluid. All they knew was that they hadn't contracted guardians. However, Zhouwen in front of her most likely hadn't used anything like mythical fluid. This was because he didn't have any characteristics of dimensional creatures on him, nor did he sense any auras other than humans. A human could actually reach such a level and even fight a calamity-grade expert. This dealt a huge blow to Yusuji Nao's heart. Can the strength of humans really be that strong? Yusuji Nao's conviction that she had always held onto wavered. Although she was a very opinionated person and had always done things according to her own ideas, Zhouwen's performance made Yusuji Nao, who had a heart of steel, begin to doubt herself. Even if the four heavenly kings attacked together, they probably wouldn't be able to last a minute against such a powerful calamity-grade force. However, Zhouwen had managed to last until now without being completely defeated. However, Zhouwen wasn't having a good time. Although the bone-chilling itch didn't affect him much, it was still a problem. Zhouwen's focus talent was unparalleled. If it was only pain and itch, it wouldn't affect him as long as he didn't think about it. He was afraid that calamity-grade power wasn't that simple. If the subsequent heavenly tribulation directly attacked his body, Zhouwen's body wouldn't be able to withstand the impact of the calamity-grade power. He would be instantly killed. In a battle with a calamity-grade, I can only summon Truth Listener or use the immortal culling sword. Otherwise, there's no chance of victory. I won't even have a chance to fight. Unless I can advance to the Terror grade, I might still have a chance. Zhouwen thought of Slaughterer. Slaughterers could only advance in rank if they could instill fear in their opponents. However, the one being suppressed right now was him. His opponent had an absolute advantage. Forget instilling fear in his opponent. It was impossible for him to even injure his opponent. 3 minutes passed quickly, but Zhouwen still couldn't think of a solution. The heavenly tribulation changed again. This time, Zhouwen no longer felt itchy, but something even more terrifying happened to him. Zhouwen instantly felt that his various sensory abilities had been magnified countless times. He was even sharper than when he used Great Brahma. Zhouwen couldn't help but scream. Pain, numbness, soreness, and itchiness surged through him under the stimulation of the lightning. Originally, such stimulation wasn't something Zhouwen couldn't endure. Usually, he wouldn't even grunt. However, because his perception had been magnified, Zhouwen was extremely sensitive. The painful stimulation was magnified countless times. This stimulation had already reached the limits of human pain tolerance. But once Zhouwen focused on thinking about something else, the pain would weaken. It couldn't be said that it had weakened. It could only be said that because he was distracted, he could no longer feel the pain. How can I advance Slaughterer to the Terror grade? What am I supposed to do? Although Zhouwen knew that it was very difficult, this was the best chance for him to save his life. Therefore, all Zhouwen's thoughts were on how to advance Slaughterer. The pain became weaker and weaker. 3 minutes wasn't fast, but it wasn't slow either. Soon, the third heavenly tribulation passed. During these 3 minutes, Tyrant Behemoth began to glow and heat up again because it had swallowed too many essence energy crystals. Thankfully, it wasn't as hot as before. It probably hadn't reached its limits. The fourth heavenly tribulation, lightning, surged out. This time, it wasn't as simple as physical pain. Instead, it directly penetrated his soul and affected Zhou Wen's emotions. Typically, the fourth talent would trigger hallucinations, making one see their greatest fear. Many people would die at this stage. This was because humans often wouldn't lose to powerful enemies, but they would easily lose to themselves. However, this tribulation was easier for Zhou Wen to deal with than the previous few tribulations. This was because his psyche was too focused. The heavenly tribulation lightning couldn't affect his brain, causing him to hallucinate. Zhou Wen kept thinking about how to advance Slaughterer, so he didn't notice the fourth heavenly tribulation. Time ticked by. After the 3 minutes of the fourth heavenly tribulation ended, Zhou Wen still hadn't come up with a solution. However, at that moment, Zhou Wen felt Slaughterer react. Furthermore, the reaction was very intense. What's going on? Why is Slaughterer reacting at such a time? I'm clearly at an absolute disadvantage now. It's impossible for me to instill fear in the enemy. Zhou Wen was somewhat surprised, but Slaughtereur's reaction couldn't be faked. Zhou Wen naturally didn't know how shocking it was for a perfect sword immortal that he had survived the fourth heavenly tribulation. This time, Slaughtereur's reaction was more intense than ever. Zhou Wen could even sense that Slaughtereur's aura was rising rapidly. Why is this happening? Could it be that my enemy feels fear? But he clearly has the absolute advantage. Wait, killing one's heart. Having the advantage doesn't mean he wouldn't feel fear. Zhou Wen thought of a story his grandfather had told him when he was young. It was said that there was a person in ancient times who was very worried that the sky would collapse. Every time it rained, he would flee with all his might, afraid that the sky would collapse and crush him to death. When Zhou Wen thought of this story and connected it to the current situation and Slaughtereur's reaction, he suddenly seemed to understand something. Although humans were afraid of known dangers, their fear would gradually decrease as they came into contact with them. Instead, they were extremely afraid of things that hadn't happened or had the chance to come into contact with them. For example, when standing at the edge of a high-rise building, one's legs would still go limp even if they knew that they wouldn't fall even if they were tied with ropes. Or perhaps many people were afraid that they wouldn't have anyone to support them when they were old. No matter how bad their children were, they would obey them and not dare disobey them. Killing one's heart. I see. I seem to understand. The killing of the human heart is suicide. Zhou Wen had a new realization. Many things that he couldn't understand previously suddenly became clear. Chapter 1386. It was almost impossible to guess what kind of human weakness a stranger had. Everyone, or rather, every creature, had different weaknesses. Unless God himself came, it was impossible to know what everyone's weakness was. Furthermore, if Tian Tian was really God, she couldn't see through the weaknesses of human nature, much less mortals. Although it was indeed effective to infer a person's human weakness based on their actions and reactions, in a real battle, it was impossible to have enough opportunities to observe and understand one's opponent every time. Not every powerful enemy was named Shangwan Jinhong, nor was everyone Li Xuanhuan. Zhou Wen had previously wanted to interpret human weakness through observation. This path couldn't be said to be wrong, but it was a very long one. Now he understood one thing. Perhaps he didn't need too much observation to obtain the results he wanted. All he needed to do was turn the microscopic into the macroscopic. For example, rats were afraid of cats. Some plants liked water, while others were afraid of it. Some metals were easily oxidized, while others were difficult to oxidize. Zhou Wen didn't need to understand what a person or creature was afraid of. All he needed to do was grasp the method to restrain nature. That would be much easier. This should be called enemy of nature, right? As his insights deepened, Zhou Wen realized that Slaughtereur's reaction was even more intense. He didn't know if it was because of the enemy's fear that affected Slaughterer, or if it was a result of his own epiphany. Slaughterer constantly released essence energy, as Zhou Wen felt that his body was being modified by a strange power. His body of flesh and blood was gradually becoming different. Although he still had flesh and blood, the parts that had been modified seemed to be given a new characteristic. Zhou Wen couldn't tell what kind of characteristic it was. His body was still the same, and his appearance hadn't changed at all. However, there was a qualitative change that was magical and strange. Slaughterer and Zhou-Wen's body fused as one. Zhou-Wen could clearly sense that his transformation was synchronized with Slaughterer's. The feeling was indescribable. If he had to describe it, it was like they were mentally connected twins. In the past, Zhou-Wen's connection with Slaughterer wasn't close. In the beginning, he couldn't even control Slaughterer. That was because his personality was very different from Slaughterer's. It could be said that they were polar opposites. The two weren't compatible. Only today did Zhou-Wen feel that he and Slaughterer were truly one. You are me, and I am you. There was no distinction between them. These ordinary humans had long reached a level that Zhou-Wen had only achieved today. The reason why it was so difficult for Zhou-Wen to advance to the Terror grade was that, apart from the difficulty of advancing the Lost Immortal Sutra itself, Slaughterer's personality clashed with his. However, at that moment, the two finally found a balance, or rather, the crux that connected them. Slaughterer finally opened itself to Zhou-Wen. Zhou-Wen didn't like killing, but Slaughterers were born from killing. Zhou-Wen shouldn't have condensed such a life soul, but due to the influence of the Lost Immortal Sutra and its owner, he condensed such a life soul. The two of them were constantly getting used to each other, and they were also constantly adapting to each other. Until this opportunity appeared, there was finally no gap between them. Perfect Sword Immortal was extremely shocked. A mere human actually withstood 5 rounds of Heaven's Retribution without collapsing. This was simply unimaginable. Although Perfect Sword Immortal had said that the 9 tribulations could destroy an apocalyptic grade powerhouse, it was true that very few calamity grades could survive the baptism of the 9 tribulation sword. This fellow has to be eliminated. Otherwise, he will definitely be a huge threat to our race. A cold glint flashed in Perfect Sword Immortal's eyes as killing intent unconsciously revealed itself. Previously, Perfect Sword Immortal had some reservations and wasn't willing to damage Jiang Yan's body too much. But now that he realized how terrifying Zhou-Wen was, he immediately made a decision. I can still find another spokesperson, but I definitely can't let this Zhou-Wen live. Sword beams rose from Perfect Sword Immortal's body as sword aura surged from his hair and skin. His robe fluttered as his long hair fluttered. The Sky Immortal armor that had already advanced to the Calamity grade constantly emitted sword beams. The terrifying sword intent was like a sea of hell. My lord, don't continue. Immortal's body can't hold on any longer. Cave Era had been paying attention to Jiang Yan. She was Jiang Yan's sister, so she knew how dangerous it was to be possessed by a dimensional creature. Now, she realized that Immortal's body had already shown signs of essence energy crystallization. This meant that Jiang Yan's body couldn't hold on any longer. If this continued, his body would completely crystallize. Even if he killed Zhou-Wen, Jiang Yan would be dead. However, Perfect Sword Immortal ignored her. Now, he only wanted to kill Zhou-Wen, a huge threat. Everything else was secondary. Seeing that the sword intent and sword beams on Perfect Sword Immortal's body were rapidly strengthening, Cave Era's heart turned cold. Yusuji now and Blood Shaman also had complicated expressions. Anyone could tell that Perfect Sword Immortal was going to sacrifice Immortal. If even Immortal was going to be sacrificed, what about them? Cave Era instantly made up her mind. The time powers on her body rapidly gathered as the time around her seemed to freeze. Cave Era, what are you trying to do? Yusuji now and Blood Shaman looked at Cave Era in surprise. Immortal can't die. You can stop me, but today's Immortal might be tomorrow's you, Cave Era said. Blood Shaman and Yusuji now exchanged looks. Blood Shaman said, even if we don't stop you, will the Guardian on you help you? Blood Shaman's words were very sinister. After all, Guardians were created by the Dimension. Would they become enemies with dimensional experts for humans? One had to know that the Guardian contract was an equal contract. The Guardian could unilaterally terminate the contract at any time. Are you still willing to follow me? This trip might lead to death. If you aren't willing, leave by yourself. Cave Era extended her palm and looked at her guardian armor as she muttered to herself. You know that you will die. Why fight? An ancient voice sounded from Cave Era's body. Because living like this will be more painful than dying, Cave Era answered. After a second of silence, it wasn't just Cave Era. Yusuji now and Blood Shaman also held their breaths nervously as they stared at the guardian armor on Cave Era's body. The voice that seemed to come from the dust of history sounded again. Instead of living forever in endless time, why don't you transform into eternity in limited time? Since you want to fight, I'll grant your wish. Time is infinite. The voice seemed to tear open the dusty door of history. The entire armor began to erupt with the power of time, instantly pushing the power of time to its limits. Everything around seemed to freeze as everything turned in a super slow motion. Chapter 1387. Thank you. Cave Era felt the power of infinite time erupt from her body. Although she couldn't truly achieve infinite time due to her level's limitations and stop time, such power was already the limit of the Terror Grade. In a certain aspect, it had already broken through the limits of the Terror Grade. Without daring to hesitate, Cave Era knew that this was the power produced by the Guardian burning itself. It wouldn't last long. Only during this period of time could she do something. Attack Perfect Sword Immortal? Of course not. Cave Era knew very well that her strength was too inferior. Even if the Guardian burned itself to produce power, it wasn't enough to shake Perfect Sword Immortal. So, Cave Era's eyes flashed as she ran toward Jowen. Under the influence of infinite time, the surrounding time seemed to come to a halt. Even the Calamity Grade Sword Beam didn't move that fast. At the very least, Cave Era could keep up with the speed of the Calamity Grade Sword Beam in infinite time. Cave Era's figure shuttled through the sword beam like a ghost in the river of time. She charged in through the sword halo and landed on the Chaos Egg. Do you know what the outcome of betrayal is? Perfect Sword Immortal stared coldly at Cave Era. The sword intent on his body was still rising crazily. Half of Jiang Yan's body had already crystallized. I only know that immortals are the masters of the League of Defender. As Cave Era spoke, she pressed her hands on the Chaos Egg. The condensed time power instantly erupted, causing the surrounding time to distort and change, producing a chaotic phenomenon of time. Even the Calamity Grade Sword Beam seemed to be stuck. Time! Samsara! Cave Era screamed as though this was the only way she could squeeze out the last bit of her strength. She knew that she couldn't injure Perfect Sword Immortal, much less stop him from continuing to unleash his strength. The only thing she could do was take Jowen away. As long as she took Jowen away, Perfect Sword Immortal wouldn't have a reason to continue unleashing his strength. Perhaps Jiang Yin could survive. The Chaos Egg's time was distorted as Cave Era and the Chaos Egg vanished into thin air. They actually left Perfect Sword Immortal's domain. However, less than 5 kilometers away from Perfect Sword Immortal's domain, the Chaos Egg and Cave Era fell out together. The Guardian armor on Cave Era's body lost all its luster, as though it had turned into a fossil. With the strength of the Terror Grade, Cave Era couldn't withstand the expenditure of using the two top time elemental skills, Infinite Time and Time Samsara. Jowen saw everything from inside the Chaos Egg. The moment the Chaos Egg and the Cave Era fell out, Jowen rushed out and grabbed the severely depleted Cave Era. He wanted to use interstellar teleportation to reach Venus. However, he soon realized that interstellar teleportation still couldn't be used. Light bloomed around him as he looked up and saw that the sky was completely enveloped by sword beams. At some point in time, Perfect Sword Immortal had already floated in the sky like a sun. The light emitted from his body was the omnipresent sword flashes. Is it too late? Cave Era smiled bitterly. She had already tried her best to bring Jowen out, but the expenditure of breaking through the Calamity Domain was just too great. The place she brought Jowen out was too close. Now that Perfect Sword Immortal's Calamity Domain had expanded, she no longer had the strength to take Jowen out. Traitor! It's time to atone for your sins. Perfect Sword Immortal stood high and mighty like a true immortal as he looked down at Zhou Wen and Cave Era. At that moment, his gaze was focused on Cave Era. At the same time, sword beams emitted from his body like the sun, illuminating everything. Sword beams were everywhere. Zhou Wen had yet to advance to the Terror Grade. He wanted to pull Cave Era into the Chaos Bead, but the Chaos Bead required a creature's willingness to enter. Cave Era was worried about Jiang Yin and had no intention of escaping, so Zhou Wen couldn't pull her in. However, the Chaos Egg could only protect Zhou Wen. If he used the Chaos Egg now, he would have to leave Cave Era outside. Zhou Wen wasn't a good person, but he wasn't willing to watch Cave Era die. This was because she was Jiang Yan's sister and had just tried to save him. I'll treat it as a last resort. If it works, you can live. If it doesn't work, I've tried my best. When the time comes, don't blame me for escaping myself. Zhou Wen pulled Cave Era and quickly teleported. When they came out, Zhou Wen had already transformed into a Chaos Egg and blocked Cave Era behind him. The sun-like sword beam was everywhere. Just as they appeared, they were struck by the sword beam. Thankfully, with the Chaos Egg in front of them, Cave Era wasn't injured. Otherwise, in her present state, she would probably die. Boom! The Chaos Egg slammed into Cave Era's body and flew out like a cannonball. It slammed into a mountain range, breaking a mountain peak. It smashed into the valley, creating another huge hole at the bottom of the valley. Zhou Wen came out of the Chaos Egg and pulled up Cave Era, who was vomiting blood. When he looked up, he realized that the sun-like perfect Sword Immortal was less than 5 meters in front of them. He was staring at them coldly. Jiang Yin, oh Jiang Yin, I hope you aren't joking with me. Zhou Wen looked around, but he didn't discover anything special. This was the place Jiang Yin had previously pointed out to Zhou Wen. He had gone to great lengths to bring Cave Era here, hoping that there was something special about this place that might be able to withstand it. However, no matter how he looked, he couldn't see anything special about this place. There wasn't even a dimensional zone. It was impossible for him to escape into a dimensional zone to seek refuge. Perfect Sword Immortal didn't wish to waste any more time. He once again unleashed a sun-like sword beam, hoping to kill Zhou Wen and Cave Era. Zhou Wen was already planning on hiding in the Chaos Egg, but he suddenly realized that the sword beams had stopped less than a meter away from them. They didn't shoot over again. Jiang Yin really didn't lie to me. But what's going on? I didn't discover any special power nearby. What's stopping these sword techniques? Zhou Wen was pleasantly surprised as he looked at the sword beam that was as still as sunlight. He looked up at Perfect Sword Immortal and saw him pressing his face with one hand. His body was trembling slightly as though he was in a battle. You're too naive to want to vie with me for control of your body. Everything you have already belongs to me. What else can you use to compete with me? Perfect Sword Immortal seemed to mutter to himself. His tone was fierce as he gradually raised his face. Although he couldn't see what his face looked like under the mask, his eyes seemed to be recovering to their previous state. Suddenly, a petal that resembled a rose flew out from the deep valley. It passed through the layers of sword beams and landed on Perfect Sword Immortal's forehead. Chapter 1388. The Perfect Sword Immortal's strength was extremely powerful. Even the Chaos Egg couldn't withstand the increasingly powerful sword beam. As for the seemingly weak petal, it didn't fly very fast. Yet, it was able to pass through the layers of sword beams and land on Perfect Sword Immortal's forehead. This was truly unbelievable. What was even more surprising was that after the petal landed on Perfect Sword Immortal's forehead, it melted like a snowflake and seeped into his guardian armor. In the next second, purplish-red petals appeared on Perfect Sword Immortal's body. In the blink of an eye, they enveloped his entire body, forming a flower armor. Fairy Burial. Zhou Wen immediately widened his eyes. He never expected that the Immortal would be Jiang Yin, because the Immortal's guardian wasn't Fairy Burial. Back then, he had contracted Jiang Yan's guardian with him, so how could not be familiar with it? At that moment, he recognized it at a glance. So that's how it is. It's no wonder Cave Era wants to save me. So the person she really wants to save is Jiang Yin. Zhou finally understood. Previously, he was puzzled as to why Cave Era would take such a huge risk to save him. Just because he was her younger brother's junior didn't seem to make sense. You actually contracted 2 guardians. Perfect Sword Immortal already understood what had happened, and why the sword beam couldn't injure the petal. He was using Jiang Yin's body to fight. In essence, the current Perfect Sword Immortal was actually Jiang Yin. As for Fairy Burial, he had a contract with Jiang Yin. Furthermore, it wasn't an ordinary guardian contract. It was a life-and-death contract. If Jiang Yin was injured, it was equivalent to Fairy Burial being injured. It was the same the other way around. Therefore, Perfect Sword Immortal couldn't injure Fairy Burial, or he would be injuring himself. Unless he abandoned Jiang Yin's body, it was impossible for him to injure Fairy Burial. That's not right. What guardian is this? Perfect Sword Immortal frowned slightly. The flower armor formed by the guardian was actually absorbing and devouring his calamity powers. Perfect Sword Immortal naturally sensed that the flower armor was only at the Terra grade, but for some reason, it could absorb his calamity grade powers. Although the absorption speed wasn't fast, this kind of absorption was very rare. Perfect Sword Immortal could faintly feel that the power of the flower armor seemed to restrain him. Under normal circumstances, he should have been able to control Jiang Yan's contracted guardian since he had already occupied Jiang Yan's body. However, this flower armor rejected his will and wasn't under his control. Immortal Burial. Jiang Yin regained the power of Immortal Burial and finally regained some control. However, he could only make a sound. The rest of the control was still in the hands of Perfect Sword Immortal. You deserve to die just because of that. You've been patiently plotting for so long just to borrow its power to devour me. Sword Immortal Omnipotence said coldly. It's a pity that you're still ignorant. Although I don't know why this guardian's power has a faint restraining effect on me, its power is still too weak. As long as I leave your body, I can easily destroy both your body and it. Do you dare to leave my body now? Jiang Yin said indifferently. Perfect Sword Immortal understood what Jiang Yin meant. Without Jiang Yin's body as a support, he would be repelled by Earth's laws. When that happened, his strength would be greatly weakened. With Zhou by his side, if he would be weakened to the Terra grade, he would probably die. It would be useless even if he destroyed Jiang Yan's body. It'll be the same to kill you after I kill him. Perfect Sword Immortal Omnipotence turned to look at Zhou. The power of Immortal Burial wasn't too harmful to him for the time being. He had only absorbed a very small portion of its power, so it didn't affect his combat strength much. Perfect Sword Immortal Omnipotence only needed to follow his previous plan to kill Zhou when before leaving Jiang Yan's body to kill Jiang Yan and Immortal Burial. However, Perfect Sword Immortal Omnipotence was still somewhat puzzled as to why Jiang Yan could contract 2 guardians. In theory, it was impossible for the same person to contract 2 guardians. Furthermore, guardians wouldn't be willing to share their contractors with other guardians. This was because guardians were natural enemies to begin with. They were created to defeat each other. It was impossible for guardians of different races to contract the same person. Jiang Yin, what other plans do you have? Tell me quickly, Zhou shouted at Jiang Yin. Since Jiang Yin had set up such a trap, he should have a way to deal with Perfect Sword Immortal Omnipotence. My plan is for you to hold him back while I absorb his strength, Jiang Yin said. Zhou was slightly taken aback before he flew into a rage. F***CK your sister. Is that something a human would say? You call this a F***king plan? Don't be anxious. That was just plan A. I still have plan B, Jiang Yin added. Only then did Zhou feel a little relieved as he pulled the Cave Era and said, Look at the situation. You're still in the mood to joke. Hurry up and tell me. Plan B is for you to directly injure Perfect Sword Immortal Omnipotence. This way, I can absorb faster and the danger will be resolved faster, Jiang Yin said. Are you sure you're speaking human? Zhou was speechless. Don't feel so inferior. Have confidence in yourself. I'm very confident in you. All the best. Kill him. Also protect my sister. Jiang Yan's tone was very relaxed. as though perfect sword immortal omnipotence was a cat that could be killed with a single strike. "Are you done?" Perfect sword immortal omnipotence's voice seemed to emit a cold aura. It was obvious how angry he was. Jiangyan didn't treat him as a human at all. He actually said that he wanted Zhou Wen to kill him. Should I say that you are optimistic or ignorant? Humans can't even leave Earth. From the looks of it, it's not without reason. As perfect sword immortal spoke, the sword beam on his body erupted like the sun again, hoping to kill Zhou Wen first. "Come in." Zhou Wen extended his hand and pulled the cave era. This time, the cave era didn't resist, as it obediently was pulled into the chaos bead by Zhou Wen. Almost at the same time, the chaos egg enveloped Zhou Wen's body. Boom! The omnipresent sword beams struck the chaos egg. The solid crystals in the chaos egg instantly filled up. Zhou Wen didn't have the time to transfer them to Tyrant Behemoth. The continuous sword beams had already stabbed the chaos egg in several spots. In the blink of an eye, the chaos egg was about to turn into a hedgehog. In the chaos egg that was riddled with holes, the solid essence energy immediately vaporized when it encountered the outside air, turning into white essence energy that spewed out. Inside the chaos egg, Zhou Wen saw sword beams pierce through it. He knew that it was difficult to dodge, but he was still a little short. He ultimately failed to break through the final barrier and advance to the Terrorgrade. What's missing? More and more sword beams appeared in front of Zhou Wen. Some of them were about to stab his face. Die! Perfect sword immortal squeezed out his last bit of strength, hoping to kill Zhou Wen as soon as possible. The blazing sword beam seemed to devour the entire world, destroying everything around it. Even the dust was sliced apart by the sword beam. Chapter 1389. The invincible 10,000 sword beams illuminated everything, destroying everything. The chaos egg, which was already riddled with holes, immediately shattered. Zhou Wen no longer had any cover. Teleportation was no longer effective under such circumstances because the sword beams were omnipresent. No matter where Zhou Wen teleported to, he would still be killed by the sword beams. Unless he could leave the perfect sword immortal's calamity domain, that was naturally impossible. Zhou Wen had yet to advance to the Terrorgrade, but he had no choice but to risk his life. He took out the immortal culling sword, but his heart kept sinking. This was because the immortal culling sword could only slash out once, and he was surrounded by sword beams. If he slashed out, he would be pierced by 10,000 swords. What was even more unbearable was that Zhou Wen knew very well that even if he used immortal slaying, he couldn't kill such a powerful, perfect sword immortal. His strength was too weak, preventing him from unleashing the full might of the immortal culling sword. A full-powered strike was equivalent to a calamity grade strike. Such an attack couldn't hit a perfect sword immortal. Zhou Wen even realized that his hand speed couldn't keep up with his conscious reaction. Before he could draw the immortal culling sword, the sword beam had already arrived in front of him. Am I going to die just like that? Zhou Wen held the sword and looked at the dazzling sword beam that was everywhere. He felt fear and indignation. Although he didn't have the time to think too much, the instinctive fear arose involuntarily. Suddenly, the sword beam that destroyed everything stopped in front of Zhou Wen. The tip of the sword beam was almost touching Zhou Wen's cornea. Zhou Wen's body involuntarily trembled, as though a chill had rushed from his feet to his head. After it spread throughout his body, it made Zhou Wen feel a little hot. His face seemed to have a fever as his dizzy legs turned a little limp. The feeling of taking a trip to the gates of hell was something that could not be experienced by those who were not personally involved in it. As the saying went, there was great horror between life and death, but it was very difficult to experience that horror. This was because by the time one experienced it, they would already be dead. It was useless even if they experienced it. Those who could experience the terror of life and death and survive were all extremely lucky. It was not an exaggeration to say that they had been reincarnated. At that instant, Zhou Wen experienced the horror of life and death. His mind immediately became as clear as a mirror. Many things that he usually cared about were nothing at that moment. It was laughable to grieve over those matters. At the same time, Zhou finally understood why he couldn't take the final step to advance to the terror grade. It was because he had never felt true fear. So how could he understand the fear of others? Only those who had truly experienced fear would understand what it was. What are you waiting for? Use your sword and kill him. Jiang Yan's voice was almost a roar, but he also knew that it was already too late when he shouted. Zhou still hadn't reacted. Jiang Yan's heart immediately turned cold. The limit of what he could do was to use all the power and unique abilities accumulated by Immortal Burial in that instant. He took advantage of the moment when Perfect Sword Immortal attacked with all his might, and his control over his body was at its weakest to regain control of his body. He originally believed that he and Zhou had such a tacit understanding. That instant was enough for Zhou to slash out that earth-shattering strike. It was the strike that had once killed a dimensional calamity, the strike that belonged to Human Emperor. However, Zhou was taken aback at such a critical moment and missed that instant. What a pity. You sure schemed well. What a good move. Perfect Sword Immortal had already regained control of his body as he broke out into a cold sweat. He never expected Jiang Yan to be able to regain control of his body. Although it was only for an instant, it was enough to shock him. If Zhou hadn't reacted in time, he might have been severely injured in that instant. When he saw the immortal culling sword in Zhou hand, he already knew Zhou's identity. He also knew that Zhou did have the ability to severely injure him. So Zhou is Human Emperor. What a pity. Humans are humans after all. Faced with the extreme fear of death, they ultimately can't face it calmly. You missed your only opportunity and wasted your painstaking scheming. Perfect Sword Immortal said with a sneer, Jiang Yan, oh Jiang Yan, you are indeed a talent. However, you chose the wrong person and stood on the wrong side. As Jiang Yan had unleashed all his strength, he was already exhausted. He didn't even have the ability to control his body to make sound. Don't choose the wrong person again in your next life. Perfect Sword Immortal controlled the sword beam to shoot out again, about to kill Zhou. However, when he looked at Zhou, he was surprised to discover that Zhou's body was emitting a strange aura. That aura disgusted and even terrified him. Terror transformation? Wasn't that ball his terror transformation power? Perfect Sword Immortal sized up Zhou suspiciously. He originally imagined that the Chaos Egg was Zhou's terror grade power. However, from the changes in Zhou's body, it was a sign that he had just advanced to the terror form. This left him in disbelief. He couldn't believe that the human he had fought for so long wasn't even at the terror grade. However, Perfect Sword Immortal couldn't care less. He sent 10,000 sword beams stabbing down. Regardless of whether he was at the terror grade or the mythical stage in the past, he would kill him first. The sword beam that resembled sunlight engulfed Zhou, and amidst the sword beam that made it impossible to look at it directly, an extremely discordant light suddenly appeared. Crack! Crack! Kacha! 10,000 sword beams shattered like glass as they scattered in all directions. 10 million sword beam fragments rose into the air, refracting light, making the surrounding light blurry and dreamy. A sword beam split the water in waves, splitting the shattered sword beams that filled the sky into two. It was as though the sea had split into two as a sword beam shot straight at Perfect Sword Immortal. Perfect Sword Immortal condensed a sword with his finger and converged the sword beams on his body into one to meet the sword beam. In the world, all swords have to obey me. Fighting me with a sword is courting death. As Perfect Sword Immortal spoke, his sword beam had already collided with the sword beam. Boom! The sword beam collided with the sword beam, producing a terrifying shockwave. Perfect Sword Immortal's heart palpitated as he dodged to the side, but he was still a little too slow. His cheek was swept by the sword beam's tail, immediately leaving a bloody mark. A drop of blood slowly dripped down his cheek. What's going on with that sword? Why can its power restrain my sword beam? Impossible. How can there be a sword in the human world that I can't control? Perfect Sword Immortal's eyes warped as he stared at Zhou. He held the immortal culling sword in his hand as he walked over step by step. His heavenly robe fluttered in the wind, and he wasn't injured. Why do I have to wait for the next life? I think I can choose again now. Zhou felt the strength in his body and the sword intent that roared like an evil spirit in the immortal culling sword. This was the first time he could control the immortal culling sword freely. Chapter 1390. All the swords in the world might be under your control, but you can't control this sword of mine, Zhou said as he slashed out with immortal culling again. The sword beam was wild. Zhou felt essence energy gush out of Slaughterer. The immortal culling sword, which had extremely high requirements for essence energy, trembled and moaned after receiving the endless essence energy. It was the thirst of the parched land for rain, the satisfaction of a hungry wolf eating meat. The immortal culling sword had been thirsty for too long. In the past, Zhou's essence energy wasn't enough to power it. In the past, every time Zhou used the immortal culling sword, it was like giving a drop of water to a person who was dying of thirst. When this drop of water landed on his lips, not only did it not quench his thirst, but it also made him yearn for it even more. Buzz, as Zhou brandished it, the immortal culling sword hummed as it slashed out sword beams. Perfect Sword Immortal condensed a sword beam to fight Zhou, but he was shocked to discover that his sword beam was restrained by Zhou's sword beam. It was like a mortal weapon encountering a divine weapon that could slice through metal like mud. It would be sliced apart the moment it came into contact. Retreat. He retreated again. Perfect Sword Immortal was alarmed to discover that, as a Sword Immortal, he could only retreat again and again under Zhou's sword. He wanted to counterattack, but for some reason, no matter how uncomfortable Zhou's sword technique made him feel, it was as though the sword beam restrained his sword beam. It made him feel terrible and unable to unleash his full combat strength. Perfect Sword Immortal suddenly had a feeling. It was a subconscious feeling that he was afraid of Zhou. This fear was ingrained in his bones as though it was innate. What's going on? A terrorgrade human. How? Sword Immortal's eyes wavered as cracks appeared in his heart. Fear constantly spread in his heart. Blood Shaman and Yu Suji now, who were watching from afar, stared blankly. Zhou is the human sovereign. Yu Suji now watched as Zhou forced Perfect Sword Immortal to retreat with his sword. Perfect Sword Immortal, who was so powerful that it left one in despair, was completely suppressed. It was as though he didn't even have a chance to counterattack. Is it the Terrorgrade, right? Blood Shaman said with a strange expression. No one could answer him. Only the world-shaking sword chi and sword cries reverberated between the heavens and the earth. Zhou felt as though he was in an invincible state. It wasn't just because of the powerful combat strength unleashed by the immortal culling sword, but also because of the power that Slaughterer and advancing to the Terrorgrade gave him. In the past, Zhou needed all sorts of observations and schemes to deduce the enemy's weakness, but now, it seemed very natural. He didn't need too much observation to attack the enemy's weakness. It was as though it had become an instinct. This instinct was not an unfounded intuition, but a judgment based on a certain rule. It was just like learning a mathematical formula. No matter how complicated the question was, as long as one mastered the formula, one would be able to get the answer without having to look at all the questions. This was the case for Zhou. He didn't need to see the weaknesses of all creatures, but he could determine their weaknesses. This feeling was simply intoxicating. The thrill of being able to see through everything with a single glance was somewhat like being a god. Coupled with the power unleashed by the immortal culling sword and its restraining effect on immortals, as well as Zhou's heart-defying sword art, he managed to suppress Perfect Sword Immortal to the point of being unable to counterattack. If the body wasn't Jiang Yan's, Perfect Sword Immortal would have been killed by the immortal culling sword. Perfect Sword Immortal seemed to have seen through this as well. He stopped defending and transformed into a sword beam to escape. Although Zhou Wen's speed wasn't as fast as perfect sword immortal, he had the help of spatial teleportation. After Slaughterer advanced to the Terror grade, Zhou Wen underwent a tremendous change. This change didn't just give him a slight increase in his physique. In fact, it had a greater impact on his other Terror transformation abilities. For example, in his true Terror transformation state, he could use the Godfiend era's teleportation ability almost instantaneously. It wasn't like in the past where there was an obvious pause. Another example was using the Singularity Universe's teleportation ability, which greatly increased his accuracy. The other Terror transformation abilities seemed to be augmented by a halo under Zhou Wen's Terror transformation state, greatly strengthening them. Zhou Wen teleported almost infinitely as he forcefully kept up with the Calamity-grade Perfect Sword Immortal. The immortal culling sword in his hand constantly slashed out, forcing Perfect Sword Immortal to dodge in a sorry state. Perfect Sword Immortal had also attempted to use the immortal culling sword on Jiang Yan's body, but he was shocked to discover that after the immortal culling sword injured Jiang Yan's body, it carried a strange power. The power directly damaged his immortal body, but didn't injure Jiang Yan's body. It was as though it was a power specially created to deal with immortals. Perfect Sword Immortal was alarmed and furious. He never expected that he would end up in such a sorry state when he descended to Earth. Zhou Wen, Jiang Yan, I'll remember you. Perfect Sword Immortal wanted to leave Jiang Yan's body and return to the dimension. However, he was even more shocked to discover that he couldn't leave Jiang Yan's body. The flower armor-like fairy burial seemed to have some mysterious power that imprisoned his soul that had descended into Jiang Yan's body. How can this be? The Perfect Sword Immortal was extremely regretful. He never thought that his careless decision could cost him his life here. He wanted to destroy the fairy burial on his body, but he realized that it was impossible. This was because the fairy burial armor had already fused with the Heaven Immortal armor, and the Heaven Immortal armor had been helped by Perfect Sword Immortal himself to advance to the Calamity grade. In addition to the battle with Zhou Wen, he had injected a large amount of Immortal Essence Sword Chi into the Heaven Immortal armor. Now, the Heaven Immortal armor was already at the Calamity grade. Furthermore, after fusing with the Fairy Burial armor, it had the power to restrain Perfect Sword Immortal's essence energy, making it impossible for Perfect Sword Immortal to suicidally destroy Jiang Yan's body. Don't you think it's too late to leave now? Jiang Yan finally regained control of a portion of his body. Perfect Sword Immortal immediately felt that something was amiss, but it was already too late. Jiang Yan once again unleashed the power of the Fairy Burial armor and temporarily regained control of his body. This time, Zhou Wen didn't miss out. The immortal culling sword left his hand and transformed into a sword beam that instantly pierced through Perfect Sword Immortal's body, nailing him to the mountain wall. The power of the immortal culling sword instantly spread throughout Perfect Sword Immortal's body. The power dealt great damage to Perfect Sword Immortal, but it didn't deal much damage to Jiang Yan's body. In the battle just now, Zhou Wen had already discovered this point. Although the immortal culling sword could kill other creatures and its destructive power was equally powerful, it had a special lethality against Perfect Sword Immortal. When it injured ordinary creatures, the wound wouldn't continue spreading, but it was different for Perfect Sword Immortal. After injuring him, it would continue to damage his immortal body. Chapter 1391. Perfect Sword Immortal had been severely injured by the immortal culling sword. Although Jiang Yan's body was also injured, it wasn't as serious as Perfect Sword Immortal's, nor did he suffer any sustained damage. Under such circumstances, he finally regained most of his control over his body. At the same time, Immortal Burial, which had fused with the Sky Mortal armor, crazily absorbed Perfect Sword Immortal's energy. Under the dual attacks of the immortal culling sword and Immortal Burial, Perfect Sword Immortal roared in pain as he lost his voice bit by bit. Finally, he was completely absorbed by Immortal Burial. The flower armor on Jiang Yan's body was red and purple. It was extremely seductive, like a resurrection lily that tempted one to fall into hell. Jiang Yin reached out to hold the hilt of a mortal burial, pulled it out of his body, and threw it back to Zhou. You came too early. If you had given me some time to prepare, I wouldn't be in such a sorry state. Jiang Yin looked at the wounds on his body. The blood armor seemed to have a life of its own as it took root in his wounds and quickly healed his injured body. You were the one who didn't inform me. How would I know what you wanted to do? Zhou said, rolling his eyes. If I had told you in advance, even if you could fool everyone, I wouldn't have been able to fool the perfect sword immortal that had descended on me. Only when everything is true can I make the perfect sword immortal sink deeper and deeper, preventing him from having a chance to escape. Jiang Yin smiled and said, Thankfully, you didn't disappoint me. Although there was a small mistake, you finally achieved your goal. My heart isn't too good. If you do this again, please find someone else, Zhou said snappily. I wasn't the one who went to look for you. You came yourself, didn't you? Jiang Yin said with a smile. Zhou was taken aback. He knew that what Jiang Yin said made sense. Jiang Yin was just taking advantage of the situation. Even without Jiang Yin, the League of Defender would still deal with him. A figure like perfect sword immortal would still descend. It was just a matter of time. What plans do you have for the future? Zhou released his cave world and asked Jiang Yin. I'm a master of the League of Defender. I was, and I will be in the future. Jiang Yin looked at Yu Suji now, Blood Shaman, and the other guardians. Yu Suji now, Blood Shaman, and the other guardians flew over and said in unison, We are willing to continue following you, Your Excellency. Aren't you afraid that those fellows from the dimension will attack you? Zhou asked. I was afraid in the past, but now that my celestial immortal and burial fairy have advanced to the calamity grade, I don't need to be afraid anymore. It's not that easy for dimensional creatures to come to Earth. Even if they come, they will be greatly suppressed. Up to now, only humans can make a calamity grade stay on Earth. They can't even cross the calamity grade. Even if they borrow a body to descend, it will at most be a calamity. Do you think I need to be afraid? Jiang Yin said. All right, take care. Goodbye. No, it's best if we don't meet again. Zhou waved his hand and prepared to leave. Do you want me to help you resolve that? Jiang Yin said as he pointed at Zhou. What? Zhou was slightly taken aback. He looked down and realized that the heavenly calamity sword was still stuck in his chest, still emitting lightning. Oh, that. I forgot about it if you didn't mention it. This thing can't really hurt others. I wonder why perfect sword immortal cultivated such a useless skill. Zhou sensed that although the heavenly tribulation was still ongoing, it didn't affect him much. Previously, when he was wholeheartedly fighting, he had already forgotten about it. It was obvious how little effect the heavenly calamity sword had on Zhou. Jiang Yin looked at Zhou with a complicated expression. He had absorbed the perfect sword immortal, so he knew some of its abilities rather well. The heavenly calamity sword's attack wasn't targeted at the body, but the mind. Under the 9 stages of the heavenly tribulation, even a calamity-grade creature would most likely become an idiot or lunatic. They might even be directly wiped out and turned into a vegetable. There are many who couldn't withstand it and committed suicide. However, Zhou didn't react to the heavenly calamity sword's 9 stages of heavenly tribulation. Others didn't know how terrifying it was, but Jiang Yin knew very well that this wasn't a reaction a human should have. It's no wonder teacher said that about him, Jiang Yin thought. I'm leaving. Zhou waved his hand and turned to leave. He didn't get Jiang Yin to help him pull out the heavenly calamity sword. After advancing to the terror grade, his understanding of all kinds of powers was much stronger. He knew that the heavenly calamity sword would soon dissipate. He used teleportation to leave. With the augmentation of the terror form, the Singularity Universe's location was much more accurate. Zhou directly teleported to the vicinity of Luoyang. The deviation was only more than 5 kilometers. It was much better than before. When he arrived in an empty spot, Zhou eagerly took out his phone and looked at his stats. Zhou 1. Horror Life Providence. Sigh of the King Life Soul. Slaughter Wheel of Destiny. Not engraved. 1 rotation. Terraform. disqualified beyond S grade, strength 82. Zhou looked at his stats and was slightly dazed. He originally imagined that his terror grade was an upgraded version of Slaughterer, but from the looks of it, that wasn't the case. Slaughterer had indeed transformed into a terror form. Its name was Slaughterer. Like the other 8 terror forms, they were all S-grade terror forms. However, Zhou true terror form wasn't Slaughterer, but disqualified. Although it was related to Slaughterer, it was somewhat different. After Zhou entered the disqualified state, he had an extremely powerful augmentation to the other 9 terror forms. Furthermore, he also had the ability to spy on weaknesses. However, this ability wasn't static. It would fluctuate depending on the target creature. More common life forms had stronger abilities. Rarer life forms had weaker effects, but it wasn't to the point of being completely ineffective. Apart from that, the disqualified had a very strong augmentation to his various physiques, including his 8 senses. Otherwise, even if Zhou's strength could keep up with perfect Sword Immortal, it would still be difficult for him to match him due to his poor eyesight and reaction. In fact, Zhou's various abilities were already very close to the Calamity grade in the disqualified state. Zhou still needed to continue studying the other abilities of the disqualified. After all, he had just condensed them, so he didn't have a thorough understanding of them. Zhou pulled out Tyrant Behemoth's information to see how far it had advanced. Tyrant Behemoth, Terror Grade, Evolvable, Life Providence, Infinite Strength Life Soul, Violent Crown Wheel of Destiny, Absolute Strength Terror Form, Tyrant Strength, 82 Speed, 82 Constitution, 82 Essence Energy, 82 Talent Skill, Mountain Devouring Companion Form. Boxing Glove. He opened his phone game and randomly chose a dungeon. Zhou wanted to see what changes Tyrant Behemoth would undergo when it entered its terror form. Chapter 1392. Coincidentally, the Yang City dungeon respawned. Zhou entered the Yang City dungeon with Tyrant Behemoth. With his previous experience, Zhou didn't dare casually touch the Bloodbone universe. All he did was let Tyrant Behemoth transform and enter its tyrant state. The terror-transformed Tyrant Behemoth's body instantly became as huge as a mountain. A crown appeared on its head, and its black iron-like body suffused a red glow. Its eyes were also suffused with red light, and a red light flickered in its mouth. It looked like a devil that flashed with a sanguine glow in the night. Boom! Tyrant Behemoth's body landed. As it was too huge, it immediately stepped on a Bloodbone temple. Terror-grade creatures immediately rushed out of the Bloodbone temple and transformed into terrifying blood shadows that charged at Tyrant Behemoth. Although Zhou felt that Tyrant Behemoth probably couldn't defeat the dozen or so Terror-grade creatures, he had no intention of attacking. It was a good opportunity to see how strong a Terror-grade Tyrant Behemoth was. More than 10 Terror-grade blood shadows rushed over from different directions. Tyrant Behemoth let out a roar as the sanguine light on its body transformed into a blood flame that burned outside its body. Tyrant Behemoth suddenly exerted its strength. Its speed was terrifyingly fast. As its massive body moved, it produced illusions. Bam! The Terror-grade blood shadow that was suspected to be a spiral turtle was pierced through by Tyrant Behemoth's claws. Its sharp claws pierced deep into its body as it roared and tore its body into 2. Then, it picked up the corpse and threw it into its mouth. After chewing a few times, it swallowed it. It was as ruthless as a devil. Kill! 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 Zhou saw that Tyrant Behemoth was fighting the crowd alone, but it didn't know how to retreat. It ignored the enemy's attacks, as though all it had in its eyes was its opponent. The absolute strength of a Terror-grade creature was too powerful. In a head-on collision, no Terror-grade creature was Tyrant Behemoth's match. Their bodies were either torn apart by Tyrant Behemoth or smashed into meat patties. However, Tyrant Behemoth only attacked and basically didn't have any defensive means. It was also struck by many forces. Although its body was very strong, it didn't have absolute defense after all. it still suffered quite a number of injuries, some of which were rather serious. A blood shadow that looked like a cow or a goat slammed into Tyrant Behemoth's back. The horns that were more than 10 meters long stabbed into Tyrant Behemoth's waist. Tyrant Behemoth let out a tragic cry before grabbing Blood Shadow in front of it. It grabbed its head with one hand and its tail with the other before pulling it out with all its might. Joan watched helplessly as the Blood Shadow's body gradually elongated. Amidst an inhuman scream, its body snapped like a rubber band as blood spewed everywhere. Tyrant Behemoth fought crazily. To Joan's surprise, its injuries healed very quickly. It was even abnormally fast. Under the siege of the Terrorgrade creatures, Tyrant Behemoth became more and more ferocious the more it killed. It didn't weaken because of its injuries. Instead, the Blood Shadow's disadvantage became more and more obvious because their numbers decreased. After careful observation, Joan realized that Tyrant Behemoth's ability to quickly recover from its injuries wasn't because its physique was strong enough, but because it had devoured many opponents in battle. The energy it obtained by devouring its opponent would quickly recover its body. It was practically fighting by eating. As long as the injuries on its body were not fatal, and as long as it had food to eat, it was practically a perpetual battle machine. This guy's fighting style is too strange. However, absolute strength is really useful. Among those at the same level, Tyrant Behemoth is almost invincible. The more Joan looked at it, the more he liked it. However, he felt that Tyrant Behemoth's body was a little weak. It would be perfect if it had absolute defense. Unfortunately, absolute defense was an ability of Dragon Imprisonment. It was unlikely for it to appear on Tyrant Behemoth. After figuring out Tyrant Behemoth's true strength, Joan realized that something was amiss. Tyrant Behemoth had already killed nearly 10 Terrorgrade Blood Shadows, but they didn't drop anything. Ignoring companion eggs, he didn't even see a dimensional crystal. Joan looked at the game notification and realized that the game notification was slaying a certain creature's blood spirit. Only then did Joan come to a realization. It turned out that the Blood Shadow here wasn't the legendary terror creature. It was just an undead. There was nothing wrong with specters, but the problem was that nothing dropped. This left Joan depressed. He tried to activate some Bloodbone temples and killed the Blood Shadows himself. The outcome was the same. Nothing dropped. What crappy dungeon is this? It actually doesn't drop anything. Joan was very depressed. He originally imagined that he had found a treasured land and could grind out some Terrorgrade companion eggs, but nothing dropped. However, Joan also understood that there was definitely something impressive in such a strange place. More importantly, he didn't know if he could kill the calamity creature guarding this place. There was no immortal culling sword in game, so Joan could only rely on himself and his companion beast to fight. Since I'm already here, let me see what secrets are hidden in Yang City. Joan summoned Banana Fairy, Demonic Neonate, and the other companion beasts as he stormed in. There were many Terrorgrade Blood Shadows here, and Joan had quite a number of Terrorgrade companion beasts. Furthermore, all of them were exquisite. Each of them could fight multiple enemies. After watching for a while, Joan suddenly thought of something. The blood spirits here were likely formed from the race of the classic of mountains and seas mutated beasts killed during the Great Flood control. The strength of the blood spirits was naturally far inferior to the real classic of mountains and seas mutated beasts. Joan even saw the phoenix-like blood spirits, but their strength was only at the top of the Terrorgrade. Compared to a real phoenix, they were probably much weaker. Such blood spirits didn't drop anything, so they might be useless to others. However, Joan had the disqualified. The disqualified had the ability to sense the opponent's weakness. This ability actually needed a certain level of basic support. If it was a creature Joan had never seen before, the disqualified's effects would be much weaker. Although the blood spirits here were much weaker than the original version, their abilities were real. Joan only needed to familiarize himself with their abilities and stats. When he encountered the real classic of mountains and seas mutated beasts, he could directly sense their weaknesses. It was equivalent to knowing their weaknesses in advance. That's not bad. Zhou originally found it boring, but after this discovery, his interest was piqued. He carefully observed the abilities of every blood spirit. As he was observing, a rather strange temple appeared in front of him. In Yang City, the buildings Zhou had seen were all made of blood and bones. However, the temple in front of him wasn't made of bones and mud. It was a stone temple. Tyrant Behemoth was in high spirits as it kept charging forward. Just as it was about to approach the stone temple, the door suddenly opened. There was a cow lying inside. Chapter 1393. When Zhou saw the bull, his heart palpitated. He immediately knew that something was amiss and wanted to unsummon his companion beasts. Unfortunately, he was still a step too late. The bull opened its mouth and let out a thunderous roar. The roar sounded like a bull or a dragon, but it also sounded like thunder. Zhou even saw the light of the sun and moon spewing out from its mouth. Accompanied by the roar, it instantly illuminated half of Yang City. Why did it say half of Yang City? It was because the stone temple was in the middle of Yang City. Only the area in front of the stone temple was illuminated. Zhou's heart stirred as he made a decision without hesitation. He immediately teleported to the area behind the stone temple. When he teleported out, his body was immediately knocked to the ground by the terrifying sound wave. His lifeblood churned as though his blood vessels were about to explode. However, this was already considered good. Tyrant Behemoth and the other companion beasts directly suffered the terrifying sound wave in the area in front of the stone temple. Their bodies exploded one by one, turning into a bloody mist. Even a terror-grade creature with a powerful body like Tyrant Behemoth couldn't withstand it. Only Banana Fairy, who saw the opportunity quickly and was fast, escaped to the area behind the stone temple like Zhou. That was why she wasn't killed by the sound wave. Her situation was similar to Zhou's. She had also been injured, but her injuries were worse than his. As for demonic neonate, she had been hugging the demonic sword and sitting on Zhou's shoulder. Although she had also been attacked by the sound wave, she looked fine. Last time, I was probably shaken to death by its roar. I have to check it out first to see what it is. As Zhou controlled the blood-colored avatar, he took out another phone and opened the browser to search the internet. This thing, could it be Kuei Neo? The more Zhou looked at it, the more he found it to be similar. Although he had only taken a glance, he knew that the bull in the stone temple didn't have horns and was still lying there. According to the information he had found online, Kuei Neo didn't have horns on its head and only had one leg. Zhou didn't see how many legs it had, but it was lying there and not standing. It was very likely because it only had one leg that it wasn't willing to stand all the time. This discovery excited Zhou because the bull was clearly not a blood spirit. It was a creature of flesh and blood. According to the information on the internet, every time the Kuei ox appeared, it would be accompanied by a violent storm. Furthermore, its body was covered in the light of the sun and the moon, and its roar was like thunder. Legend has it that when the Yellow Emperor discovered the Kuei cow, the goddess of mystery used its skin as a drum and its bones as a hammer. With a single strike, it could shake a distance of 500 miles and no one could stop it. This thing was definitely an excellent grade sound-type companion beast. Zhou didn't have any sound-type companion beast now. If he could obtain Kuei, it would make up for a weakness. Just as Zhou was thinking of something good, he heard another clap of thunder. It gave Zhou a fright, imagining that Kuei Neo was roaring again. However, when he looked up, he realized that it was real thunder and not the cry of the Kuei ox. Dark clouds covered the sky above Yang City, and thunder rumbled. Then, without any warning, a heavy downpour began. Zhou turned his head to look in the direction of the stone temple. Indeed, he saw the ox walk out of the stone temple. Its upper body was raised as it hopped forward. On careful look, it only had one leg. It walked on one leg, its body glowing like the sun and moon. It was very similar to the information Zhou had found. Kuei Neo stood in the rain and looked at Zhou. It opened its mouth and roared again. Zhou already knew that Kuei Nyo's sound wave attack was directional. Although the sound would spread in all directions, the sound in front of him was the strongest. As long as he avoided it head-on, the damage he suffered would be minimized. After dispelling Banana Fairy, he teleported again. This time, he teleported to the furthest spot behind Kuei Nyo. Indeed, the sound waves he suffered were much less. With Zhou terror transformation, he was basically unaffected by the sound waves. Kuei Nyo jumped on one leg and turned its body to face Zhou. It roared again. Zhou continued teleporting in another direction. Kuei Nyo continuously released sound wave attacks, but Zhou dodged them all. It couldn't help but be furious. Kuei Nyo didn't seek out Zhou this time. It raised its head and let out an extremely violent roar at the sky. The dark clouds and torrential rain were dispersed by its roar. The roar was accompanied by light, radiating in all directions like a sound wave, forming an indiscriminate attack. This time, Zhou had nowhere to dodge. All he could do was forcefully resist the sound waves. He summoned the recondensed Chaos Egg. The sound waves struck the Chaos Egg and immediately produced many solid crystals. Unfortunately, Tyrant Behemoth was already dead. Otherwise, he could have fed it. Kuei Nyo roared a few times, sending the Chaos Egg tumbling backward. It slammed into the city wall and bounced back. Like a billiard ball, it slammed into the various Bloodbone temples. Blood spirits quickly rushed out of the Bloodbone temple that Zhou had slammed into, but they were helpless against the Chaos Egg. Zhou took advantage of the moment Kuei Nyo was tired to instantly appear behind it. He used his hand as a saber and slashed out with Immortal Slaying. Without the augmentation of the Immortal Culling Sword, Zhou's Immortal Slaying was still very strong. The strength that erupted was almost comparable to a Calamity Grade. However, when this strike struck Kuei Nyo's neck, it only left a shallow wound. Furthermore, the wound quickly healed. It was useless. Zhou and Kuei Nyo constantly fought, but neither of them could do a thing to the other. The Chaos Egg could withstand Kuei Nyo's sound wave attack, and Kuei Nyo couldn't catch up to Zhou. It had no other means to injure Zhou, nor could it kill him. Although Zhou could injure Kuei Nyo due to its powerful physique, Zhou's offensive strength could only touch the threshold of the Calamity Grade. He couldn't heavily injure Kuei Nyo, nor could he kill it. In the end, Zhou gave up and retreated. There was no point in continuing. The injuries he inflicted on Kuei Nyo weren't as fast as its self-healing speed. No, I have to think of a way to obtain a good weapon. Zhou was thinking about where to obtain a Calamity-grade weapon. If he couldn't obtain a Calamity-grade weapon, he had to obtain a Terra-grade weapon with extremely destructive strength. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to kill Kuei Nyo. Bamboo Blade has shattered, and I can't pull out the Emperor's Sword. Although the Immortal Culling Sword is useful, I can't bring it into the game. Where can I get a weapon? After some thought, Zhou realized that only the glove formed by Tyrant Behemoth was reliable. After all, with the augmentation of absolute strength, the Tyrant Glove's attack power was undoubtedly top-notch among Terra-grade weapons. The only flaw was that the Tyrant Glove didn't have a skill augmentation, so it couldn't produce effects similar to Ever Victorious and Unstoppable. If there aren't any, I'll close it up and let the Tyrant Glove have those skills. Zhou made up his mind to augment the Tyrant Glove with all sorts of enhancement skills. Chapter 1394. Who dares barge into the 8 tribes' territory? Yiksha and Garuda, who were guarding the 8 tribes' holy mountain, immediately shouted when they saw an outsider walking towards the holy mountain. The person looked like a man in his 30s, but he had a head full of white hair. He was dressed in snow-white clothes as he walked over step by step. He was clearly walking on the ground, but he gave off the feeling that he was walking on clouds. It was as though the ground beneath his feet wasn't dirty, but pure white clouds. The man didn't answer as he continued walking over. Yiksha and Garuda were immediately enraged. Those who could be sent to guard the holy mountain were the cream of the crop among the 8. They could be said to be elites, so they had never been belittled like this. They released their terrorgrade powers and attacked the white-robed man from the left and right. The white-robed man didn't seem to see them as he continued walking forward. As for Yiksha and Garuda, they flew up with tragic cries when they arrived in front of the white-robed man. It was as though invisible sword intents had flashed past, slicing their powers and bodies into pieces, turning them into a rain of blood. The white-haired man acted as though nothing had happened as he stepped onto the holy mountain stone steps. The spot where he stood was clean and flawless, but behind him was a patch of blood-stained sand. Yiksha and Garuda's tragic cries before their deaths had already alarmed the 8 tribes on the mountain. Many of them rushed down the mountain and were enraged when they saw the blood on the ground and the white-haired man who was climbing the mountain. Many hot-tempered Shuras and Yakshas had already charged at the white-haired man. The sky was filled with colorful lights, as though countless stars were crashing down at the white-haired man. The white-haired man didn't even bat an eyelid as he continued walking up the stone steps. Without exception, the 8 tribes that charged at him were all killed by invisible sword intents. Sabers, swords, spears, musical instruments, and so on, all sorts of broken weapons flew everywhere along with flesh and blood. Wherever the white-haired man passed, none of the 8 could leave alive. On a massive holy mountain, more than 10,000 members of the 8 had gathered, but none of them dared to approach the white-haired man. With every step the white-haired man took, the 8 tribes that filled the mountain couldn't help but retreat. No one dared to resist him. My 8 tribes has always been on good terms with the immortals. As a member of the immortals, why are you slaughtering the living beings of my 8 tribes? Are the immortals going to violate the dimensional agreement? Granny Qian Xiao, who was dancing like a fairy and holding a pipa, floated in the air and stared at the white-haired man who was ascending the mountain. The male celestial ignored her and continued walking up the mountain as if he was deaf. I'm talking to you. Can't you hear me? I'm the king of Granny Ganxiao. If you have something to say, you can tell me. If you don't, take another step forward and don't blame me for being merciless. Granny Ganxiao's expression turned cold. She hugged her pipa and stared at the celestial man. The immortal ignored him and continued to walk forward. Granny Ganxiao was instantly enraged. She plucked the strings with her fingers, and the surging music turned into invisible killing intent that surrounded the male immortal. Crack! Crack! The sword light could not be seen, nor could the sound of the sword energy be heard. However, there was an invisible force that shattered the music. All the strings of the pipa in Granny Qianxiao's hands broke at the same time. Granny Ganxiao was shocked. She wanted to retreat, but it was too late. She could already feel a terrifying sword intent approaching her. Perhaps in the next second, her head would be separated from her body. As the king of Granny Ganxiao, she was a calamity-grade expert. She never expected that the other party would force her to such a state without even moving a finger. A dragon's roar resounded through the sky. A waterfall-like dragon aura descended from the peak of the sacred mountain and coiled around Granny Ganxiao's body. As if it had collided with a divine weapon, the dragon aura instantly shattered. Fortunately, the sword intent had already disappeared. Granny Ganxiao hurriedly retreated and widened the distance between her and the male immortal. Other than the kings of the 2 tribes of heaven and dragon, the other 6 kings had already appeared. They blocked the path of the male immortal, as if they wanted to take him down. Tens of thousands of the 8 tribes of heaven and dragon had already gathered. They surrounded the male immortal with weapons in their hands and pointed them at the male immortal. The tens of thousands of kings of the 8 tribes and the 6 calamity-grade kings did not seem to exist in the eyes of the male immortal. He continued to walk forward, and his gaze was fixed on a figure standing at the end of the stairs. When the 6 kings saw him like this, they were enraged and prepared to kill him here. Let him come up. A voice came from the end of the stairs. The person standing there was Wang Mingyuan, who had already become the Dragon King. He was also the one who had saved Qianta with Dragon Aura. When the 6 kings heard Wang Mingyuan's words, they could only order their troops to retreat and open up a path. However, The tens of thousands of the 8 tribes were surrounding the two sides like tigers watching their prey. They were everywhere in the sky and on the ground. If it was an ordinary person, they would have long been terrified. However, the male immortal did not feel anything and walked step by step towards the end of the stairs. "Sir, why have you come?" When the male immortal came close to Wang Mingyuan asked. The male immortal actually ignored him and walked past him. His fluttering white hair almost touched Wang Mingyuan's face. Wang Mingyuan stood there and watched as the male celestial walked into the divine hall and sat down on the main seat of the divine hall. That seat was originally the leader of the 8 tribes. Even Di Tian, who had been the leader of the 8, did not have the right to sit there. Now, Wang Mingyuan was only sitting on the second seat. Only the king of the higher race that the 8 tribes relied on had the right to sit there. When they saw the male immortal sitting on the throne, regardless of whether it was the kings or the normal members of the 8 tribes, all of them were from big tribes. They were just about to rush into the hall to kill the male immortal, but Wang Mingyuan stretched out a hand to stop them. "Sir, what do you want?" Wang Mingyuan looked at the male immortal sitting high up on the throne and asked. "From today onwards, the 8 tribes will seal the mountain for 3 years. No one from the 8 tribes will be allowed to leave. Anyone who disobeys will be killed." The male immortal looked down at Wang Mingyuan and continued. In the past, Bodhidharma faced the wall for 9 years and finally understood some things. You do not need to face the wall. Just stand there and reflect on yourself for 9 years. No matter how stupid you are, you should be able to understand some things. Why do you have to do that? The 8 tribes were enraged. King Yasha questioned them. Instantly, the crowd was infuriated. Some of the 8 tribes couldn't help but rush into the temple. Just as the battle was about to break out, they saw a golden beam of light tear through the sky. Supremacy. The golden light landed on the ground. It was a Buddha suffused with golden light. King Yaksha and company hurriedly went forward to bow, but before they could say anything, they were interrupted by the Buddha. The Buddha walked in front of the male immortal and pressed his palms together. He bowed slightly and said, "Sword Immortal, please don't be angry. From today onwards, the 8 tribes will seal the mountain for 3 years. The Dragon King will reflect on himself for 9 years and is not to leave. Sir, do you have any other requests? The disciples of my sword immortal lineage cannot die in vain. Those who kill him must pay with their lives." As the man spoke, his gaze was fixed on Wang Mingyuan. He knew that Jiang Yin was Wang Mingyuan's disciple. Chapter 1395. Of course. Buddha nodded slightly and looked at Wang Mingyuan. The news of the perfect sword immortal's death on Earth had long spread to the upper echelons of the dimension. Although not many knew the exact situation, most of the upper echelons knew that the perfect sword immortal had been schemed against by Jiang Yin. Buddha didn't find it strange that the sword immortal lineage had come to settle scores with Wang Mingyuan. However, Wang Mingyuan was now considered the leader of the 8. It was acceptable for him to reflect on himself for 9 years. If he were to really kill Wang Mingyuan, not only would the 8's reputation be tarnished, but the higher race that the 8 relied on would also have a bad reputation. This matter was done by Wang Mingyuan's disciple. Wang Mingyuan stepping forward to give the sword immortal lineage an explanation was the best outcome. When Wang Mingyuan saw Buddha look at him, he naturally knew what he meant. "How should I address you?" Wang Mingyuan's expression was as calm as ever. It was as though what the immortal had said had nothing to do with him. "Berserk sword." The male immortal finally opened his mouth and replied casually. The moment the 2 words were spoken, the expressions of the 8 changed drastically. Few people in the dimension didn't know of Berserk sword. His infamy was just too great. He was known as the #1 calamity after the apocalypse. Furthermore, this reputation wasn't just for show. Berserk sword had once killed an apocalypse as a calamity, shocking the entire dimension. Everyone knew of him. Although Wang Mingyuan had the strength of a calamity grade and had impressive combat strength, he was still far inferior to a powerful calamity like Berserk sword. Even most of the Eight believed that the King of the Eight wasn't on the same level as Berserk Sword. No one treated Berserk Sword as a calamity grade. Many even treated him as an apocalypse grade expert. Previously, the Eight were extremely indignant because of Berserk Sword's might, but when they heard his name, it was as though a basin of ice water had been poured over their heads. They felt a chill run down their spines. For some reason, the indignation in their hearts vanished. After Wang Mingyuan learned of Berserk Sword's name, he didn't show any change in expression. All he did was nod slightly before walking towards Berserk Sword. Did I say that you could move? The sword intent around Berserk Sword surged as he slashed at Wang Mingyuan. Wang Mingyuan said as he walked, "You must still be determined to get the sword that was lost on Earth in the mythological era, right? Do you know where that sword is?" Berserk Sword will pause for a moment as he stared at Wang Mingyuan. "I don't know." Wang Mingyuan shook his head frankly. "If what you're going to say next doesn't satisfy me, then it won't be something that can be solved with 9 years of self-reflection," Berserk Sword said coldly. However, Wang Mingyuan did not seem to hear what he said. As he walked toward Berserk Sword, he said, "If we want to take back that celestial sword, we need to borrow the power of the humans on Earth. You don't have any objections to this, do you?" "Continue," Berserker said with a frown. If they could directly descend to Earth to retrieve the immortal sword, the immortals wouldn't have to go through so much trouble to secretly nurture Jiang Yin and the League of Defender. They would have long gone to look for it themselves. Wang Mingyuan continued, "Then let me analyze it for you. Right now, the forces on Earth are divided into 5 major factions. The first faction is the Holy Temple and the 6 human families. I believe this faction will not be used by the immortals. You know the reason better than me." Wang Mingyuan had already walked into the hall, but he had no intention of stopping. He continued walking towards Berserk Sword, who was sitting on the main seat. As he walked, he said, "The second faction is the League of Defender. It's currently led by Jiang Yin. According to what I know, his guardian has already advanced to the calamity grade. Furthermore, the immortals are no longer able to control it." "Continue." Berserk Sword looked at Wang Mingyuan, killing intent brewing in his eyes. "The third faction is the Holy Spirit Council. President Ye is also my disciple," Wang Mingyuan said. Berserk Sword was slightly taken aback. He was actually Wang Mingyuan's disciple. He really didn't know about this. He wasn't in charge of the matters on Earth. If his disciple, Perfect Sword Immortal, hadn't died, Berserk Sword wouldn't have bothered with this matter. The fourth faction is the League government. Compared to the first 3 factions, the current League government is a little weaker. However, due to the appearance of the mythical fluid, this faction has the greatest potential. As long as there's enough time, this faction will definitely produce more and more experts in the future. It will definitely become mainstream in the future. As Wang Mingyuan spoke, he had already arrived in front of the treasure platform. He still had no intention of stopping. "Hui Haifeng is your disciple. This isn't a secret. There's no need for you to flaunt," Berserk Sword said. Wang Mingyuan smiled. "The 5th faction is those local tyrants. Among them, the Yin family in Luoyang is the strongest. Their strength can already compete with the 6 families. It's true that you were born in Luoyang, but your Wang family isn't worth mentioning in Luoyang. Don't tell me you're trying to say that in Tianzhua is also your disciple?" Berserk Sword said coldly. "No, but the 3rd person in Luoyang is Zhou Wan, who has some connections with the Yin family. He's also my disciple. You should know this very well, right?" Wang Mingyuan was already standing in front of Berserk Sword, within arm's reach. "So what?" Berserk Sword said disdainfully as he looked at Wang Mingyuan. Wang Mingyuan's disciples might be powerful figures on Earth, but in Berserk Sword's eyes, they were nothing. If it wasn't for the fact that they were born on Earth and were protected by Earth, he wouldn't even need to lift a finger to kill them. It's not a big deal. However, apart from these 5 factions, may I ask who else can help the immortals find an immortal sword? Wang Mingyuan asked Berserk Sword. Berserk Sword was slightly taken aback before his expression gradually changed. These people were really nothing in the dimension. Berserk Sword couldn't even be bothered to take a look at them. However, on Earth, The power these people possessed was unimaginable. Now that the situation on Earth had basically stabilized, there was no need to think about the Holy Temple. The Holy Temple was the Immortals' enemy to begin with. If it wasn't for the Holy Temple controlling Earth in the past, the Immortals wouldn't have been so passive. However, that Immortal Sword had an extraordinary meaning to the entire Immortals. They had to take it back no matter what. The Immortals had been accumulating for so long and had paid such a huge price to send so many guardians to Earth. Everything was for that Immortal Sword. In this era, Earth had undergone a large-scale mutation. The ruling of the 6 families had also been defeated, and the Immortals finally had an opportunity. They originally imagined that they could control the League of Defender for their own use, but to their surprise, they were schemed against by Jiang Yan. They could only blame the perfect sword immortal for being too stupid. Despite being in a good situation, they still ended up in such a state. Without the League of Defender, the Immortals could only support another human faction. However, based on the current distribution of factions, it was probably very difficult for a new faction to appear. Furthermore, the Tower of Babel was still in the hands of the League of Defender. Without the Tower of Babel's help, the Immortals couldn't send many resources to Earth. It wasn't that they lacked resources, but that they didn't have a stable passageway. Berserk Sword thought carefully and realized that the Immortals had reached a point where they couldn't use anyone. The only people they could use were Wang Mingyuan's disciples. Even if the Immortals weren't afraid of wasting time and energy to support a new faction, with Wang Mingyuan's disciples and the Holy Temple around, it was probably impossible for them to grow. Wang Mingyuan had already hinted very clearly. With his disciples around, it was a pipe dream for the Immortals to take back the Immortal Sword from Earth. Pa! Wang Mingyuan's slap landed on Berserk Sword's face, causing his face to tilt to the side. Everyone was shocked, and their eyes were glued to the screen. Berserk Sword widened his eyes as he suddenly turned to stare at Wang Mingyuan. He was like a beast that was choosing a person to devour. The sword intent on his body surged crazily as though it wanted to tear the world apart. But he didn't attack Wang Mingyuan. You're not convinced? As Wang Mingyuan spoke, he slapped Berserk Sword in the face again. With a smack, he turned his face to the other side. Then bear with it, Wang Mingyuan said indifferently as he looked at the enraged Berserk Sword. Chapter 1396. In the end, Berserk Sword didn't attack Wang Mingyuan and directly left the group of 8. Although the sword intent was still terrifying, it wasn't as intimidating as before. Instead, it made people feel somewhat embarrassed. The group of 8 looked at Wang Mingyuan with a strange expression. It seemed like it was the first time the Buddha had met Wang Mingyuan. He looked at him deeply and then left the group of 8 without saying a word. Although Berserk Sword didn't attack, his departure would greatly affect the group of 8 and the Buddha clan. He didn't know how to deal with it, so he could only do nothing and rush back to the Buddha clan to report. In an ancient temple, the Buddha reported this matter to an ancient Buddha. The ancient Buddha's eyebrows and hair were connected together, reaching the ground. His face was full of wrinkles like tree bark, and his body was covered in dust. He looked like a clay statue as he sat there. After listening, the ancient Buddha finally opened his eyes. His eyes weren't like an old man's eyes, but bright and deep as if millions of grains of sand were flowing within them. His entire body was deathly still, but his eyes were full of vitality like a youth. The Buddha bowed and asked, "Your Excellency, since Berserk Sword was able to endure this and didn't kill Wang Mingyuan on the spot, there should still be room for negotiation, right?" The ancient Buddha said indifferently, "It's not that he doesn't want to kill him, but he doesn't know if he can." The Buddha was startled, not knowing what the ancient Buddha meant. If Berserk Sword wanted to kill someone, he couldn't think of anyone he couldn't kill in this world. The ancient Buddha continued, "Berserk Sword is known as the #1 calamity in this world, and it's not a lie. Do you think an ordinary calamity can slap his face so easily? Even if he was distracted for a moment, how could he be slapped a second time?" The Buddha came to a realization and said in shock, "Your Excellency means that Wang Mingyuan is stronger than Berserk Sword." "I don't know, and neither does Berserk Sword. In addition, Wang Mingyuan is right. There are only so many people on Earth that can be used, so Berserk Sword didn't make a move," the ancient Buddha said. The more the Buddha thought about it, the more shocked he became. Apart from a sage temple and the 6 great families, all the powers that can be used are basically under the control of Wang Mingyuan's disciples. Did he do it intentionally or not? If he did, then it's too terrifying. The temple has been planning for so long, but in the end, they were still unable to control the situation. Wang Mingyuan only used a few disciples. Is it possible that it was unintentional? Whether it was intentional or not, this person will play an important role in the battle for Earth in the future. He can't be underestimated, said the ancient Buddha. Now that he belongs to our clan, can we? The Buddha said while suppressing his excitement. Fortune and misfortune come together. There's no need to worry about it. Go, the ancient Buddha said and slowly closed his eyes. He returned to his clay, statue-like appearance. The Buddha stared at the ancient Buddha in a daze. In the end, he had no choice but to bow and leave. Zhou wasn't in a good mood. He had already attempted fusion many times. As he was afraid of failure, Zhou used companion eggs as supplementary materials every time. Such a synthesis would only add the skills and not change Tyrant Behemoth. Furthermore, he chose species with a higher success rate to synthesize them. This ensured that Tyrant Behemoth wouldn't be damaged due to failure. However, no matter how they combined, they failed to obtain the few skills Zhou wanted. Every time this skill was combined, it would be combined with another skill, wiping out the previous skill. As such, it was either this skill was gone or that skill was gone. It drove Zhou crazy. He then tried the bloodline function, allowing Tyrant Behemoth to have a second life providence. However, he still failed many times. Thankfully, the bloodline function only consumed supplementary materials and didn't harm the main pet. Under the repeated failures, Zhou had the urge to fuse Heaven Azura and Tyrant Behemoth together. Heaven Azura's attack power was very strong, but compared to Tyrant Behemoth's absolute strength, it was still much weaker. However, Heaven Azura's luck was very useful. It wasn't bad if he could fuse them together. However, with so many failures, Zhou didn't dare take the risk. Furthermore, it wasn't of much use even if he fused them. This was because he had to grind companion eggs while fusing them. If he couldn't grind suitable companion eggs, he didn't even have a chance to fuse them. Now, Tyrant Behemoth had 5 skills: Armor Penetration, Piercing, Laceration, Unstoppable, and Combat God's Blessing, cast by Zhou. Previously, he had Ever Victorious, but it had been wiped out when he was grinding Unstoppable. Up to now, he hadn't been able to fuse Ever Victorious and Unstoppable at the same time. He was either lacking one or the other. In fact, Zhou had already spent money to buy quite a number of companion eggs to fuse. He didn't know how long it would take for him to fight them alone. This is the only companion egg left with Ever Victorious. Zhou looked at the companion egg in his hand and hesitated if he should continue fusing it. To be honest, the 5 skills he had were already very good. They basically enhanced his attack power, but without Ever Victorious, Zhou felt that it was a little incomplete. However, Zhou had bought all the companion eggs he could buy. He wasn't afraid of spending money, but he couldn't buy them even if he had the money. Isn't life about perfection? I'll fuse them. Zhou gritted his teeth and placed the last companion egg with Ever Victorious. Amidst the light, the companion egg and Tyrant Behemoth fused into one, flashing with the glow of a successful fusion. Zhou felt uneasy as he looked at the fused Tyrant Behemoth. Immediately, he felt a chill run from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet. Not only did he fail to fuse Ever Victorious, but even Unstoppable and Battle God's Blessing were gone. Apart from Armor Penetration, Piercing, and Laceration, he only had Poison Fangs. My Tyrant Behemoth isn't a poison-type creature. What's the use of closing Poison Fangs? Return me, Ever Victorious. Zhou was too deep for tears. Now that he didn't have ever-victorious companion eggs, he was done for. Sheng, is there anyone else selling Overlord Snake companion eggs? Zhou had no choice but to ask and Sheng again. Young master, I've really used them. I bought all the Overlord Snakes that can be obtained. Now, even the Overlord Snakes in Dragon Gate Grotto have been killed. The price of the Overlord Snake companion egg has doubled, but there's still no stock, and Sheng answered helplessly. Zhou asked a few more companion beasts he needed, but the answers were the same. He really couldn't obtain any. What should I do? Zhou was extremely depressed. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have done it. At the very least, it was unstoppable. The augmentation of the battle god's blessing wasn't bad either. It strengthened his surroundings. Tian had been watching Zhou from the side the entire time, but she didn't let him see her. This was because she hadn't been able to help him the last time he was in danger. She was a little embarrassed to appear in front of him again. Seeing Zhou's depressed look, Tian seemed to make up her mind. End of this chapter. Chapter 1397. Although he's a baddie, Mother said that everyone is equal in front of God. You should have a right to be saved. Tian muttered to herself, as though she was trying to convince herself. Zhou was extremely displeased that the fusion had failed. He put away his phone and wanted to go out for a breather, so he went to the garden. Sitting on the bench, he summoned Banana Fairy, Demonic Neonate, and the other companion beasts. He got Banana Fairy to fan the flames while the Evil Spirit King massaged his legs. He also got the other companion beasts to come out for a breather. Demonic Neonate hugged the demonic sword and stood motionless by the side. Those who didn't know would think that she was a wax figurine. I can only put the matter of giving Tyrant Behemoth the fusion skill aside for now. I'll think about it after I get the companion egg. Since I can't do anything here, I can only head to Venus to kill the Calamity who fired the bullet. If I can kill him, I might be able to get a Calamity Grey gun to drop. That would solve all the problems. Zhou's infinite loop space had basically taken shape. All he needed was the final combat test. He still needed to experiment if he could trap a Calamity Grade bullet in the infinite loop space. The Venus dungeon hadn't been refreshed yet, so he could only wait until tomorrow to test it out. Zhou leaned back on the bench and closed his eyes to relax his mind so that he could escape the depression of his failure. At that moment, Tian was standing not far from him. She was sizing up the companion beast that Zhou had summoned. She was even holding a candy in her hand. Seeing how pitiful he is, I'll give him a candy. This is to return the plum blossom cake he treated me to. I'll still take revenge for Yana. Tian muttered to herself as she sized up Zhou's companion beasts. The first thing Tian saw was Demonic Neonate. However, when she saw her, she immediately felt a sense of disgust. It was as though it was an innate hatred. Soon, Tian rejected Demonic Neonate before looking at Banana Fairy. Tian's gaze landed on Banana Fairy's chest before looking at her flatland. Then, she gave up on Banana Fairy and looked at the other companion beasts. The Evil Spirit King didn't like it either. The other companion beasts seemed to have their own problems. Zhou had quite a number of companion beasts. Although he hadn't summoned all of them, there were more than 10 outside. Tian scanned the area and hesitated for a moment before walking towards the soul reflection mirror that Zhou had placed beside him. Tian silently arrived in front of the soul reflection mirror. Although the soul reflection mirror was on the bench and couldn't be any closer to Zhou, he didn't notice her when she arrived in front of the mirror. Even the soul-revealing mirror couldn't reflect Tian's figure. It's just a mirror. It shouldn't have any destructive power, right? As long as he has some life-saving abilities, he won't have to harm others, Tian said as she peeled the wrapper off the candy in her hand and placed it on the mirror. The moment the candy touched the mirror, it immediately melted and flowed into the mirror in a strange manner. At this time, a faint shadow appeared in the mirror. The shadow swallowed the candy in one gulp. Zhou was basking in the sun comfortably when he suddenly felt the soul reflection mirror tremble unnaturally. When he opened his eyes, he realized that the soul reflection mirror had undergone a tremendous change. At that moment, the soul reflection mirror had already turned jade white like jade. The mirror's surface had also turned crystalline. It was clearly a smooth mirror, but there were many angles like the surface of a diamond. That wasn't all. The soul reflection mirror was still constantly changing. The jade layer on the surface gradually melted into juice as milky white juice dripped down. Every drop of juice reduced the jade-white color of the soul reflection mirror's body, making it even more crystalline and transparent. How can this be? Zhou Wen was alarmed as he watched the soul reflection mirror constantly evolve. This was because in such a short period of time, the soul reflection mirror that was at the mortal stage had already advanced to the epic stage. Furthermore, it was constantly evolving. However, Zhou Wen didn't remember giving the soul reflection mirror anything good. In fact, the soul reflection mirror didn't eat anything. It could only absorb some essence energy dimensional crystals every time, but the amount it absorbed wasn't much. Zhou Wen wanted the soul reflection mirror to evolve, but he couldn't think of a solution. To his surprise, the soul reflection mirror had evolved on its own. Could it be that the way the soul reflection mirror evolves is to bask in the sun? Zhou Wen looked at the sun in the sky. Apart from that, he really couldn't figure out why the soul reflection mirror would evolve. Furthermore, it had evolved so rapidly. While Zhou Wen was still thinking, the soul reflection mirror advanced again and reached the mythical stage. Zhou Wen realized that he could see a faint figure in the mirror. It seemed to be the shadow of a woman, but he couldn't see her facial features clearly. All he could see was her figure and clothes. It felt very beautiful. Why is it still evolving? Zhou Wen's expression turned odd when he saw that the soul reflection mirror was still evolving. Now, even a fool knew that the soul reflection mirror wasn't as simple as basking in the sun to evolve. Something must have happened to make it evolve. What the hell happened? Zhou Wen used Truth Listener to observe his surroundings. After advancing to the Terra grade, he was much more accustomed to Truth Listener's ability. He could already hear all kinds of sounds he wanted to hear. However, after listening for a while, he didn't discover anything. It was as though the soul reflection mirror could really evolve just by basking in the sun. Seeing Zhou Wen's surprised expression, Tian felt a little smug. Isn't it too early to be surprised now? What should I do in the future? The soul reflection mirror had already become crystalline like a crystal. The figure in the mirror became clearer and clearer. It looked like a woman in a white chiffon dress. Just from her appearance, she looked a little like a fairy. However, for some reason, Zhou Wen felt that the figure seemed a little ghostly. It wasn't as elegant and otherworldly as a real fairy. Zhou Wen wasn't just shocked because he felt that the soul reflection mirror was about to break through to the Terra grade. No way. It's about to advance to the Terra grade? Zhou Wen was a little dumbfounded. He originally imagined that Ensheng had secretly done it. From the looks of it, it was impossible for it to be Ensheng. No matter how capable Ensheng was, it was impossible for him to obtain such a good item to directly advance the mortal stage soul reflection mirror to the Terra grade. If there was such a good item, it should have been given to Entianzua first. It was impossible for it to be given to him first. Why isn't Entianzua back yet? Zhou Wen couldn't help but grumble inwardly when he thought of Entianzua. He didn't plan on guarding Entianzua's home for a long time. There were many things waiting for him to do. Luoyang was too small for him. As expected, the soul reflection mirror advanced to the Terra grade. Zhou Wen was pleasantly surprised as he looked at the glass-like soul reflection mirror that emitted a strange glow. He was delighted that the soul reflection mirror had advanced to the Terra grade, reducing the trouble of feeding it. However, he was shocked that the soul reflection mirror was still advancing without any signs of stopping its evolution. No way. Don't tell me it's really advancing to the calamity grade? Zhou Wen was alarmed and afraid. Chapter 1398. Zhou Wen knew that when an ordinary creature advanced to the calamity grade, it would trigger a calamity. He just didn't know if such a situation would happen when a companion beast advanced to the calamity grade. Regardless, Zhou wasn't willing to take the risk. He directly stored the soul reflection mirror into the chaos space. Zhou sank his consciousness into the chaos space and continued observing the changes in the soul reflection mirror. If the soul reflection mirror can really advance to the calamity grade, what kind of abilities will it have? Can the calamity grade soul, cleansing divine light, directly turn a calamity grade creature into an idiot? Many thoughts flashed through Zhou's mind. The soul reflection mirror became more and more transparent, but the woman's figure wasn't completely revealed. It remained blurry and indistinct, seemingly visible yet invisible. Not long after, the soul reflection mirror's body was almost transparent. Just as Zhou was worried that the soul reflection mirror would become invisible in the future, he wouldn't be able to see it. What if he accidentally shone it on his own people? Suddenly, beams of rainbow-colored light spewed out from the soul illumination mirror, instantly melting a large swath of the chaos fog in the chaos space. Zhou felt his divine sense ache as he couldn't help but be alarmed. He hurriedly retracted his divine sense. Even so, he still felt dizzy. His mind went blank for a moment, and his divine sense suffered quite a bit of damage. If he had retreated any later, his divine sense might have been completely destroyed. He would probably have become an idiot. Thankfully, I put away the soul reflection mirror. Otherwise, the range of the seven-colored beam would have definitely wiped out the Yin family, much less all of Luoyang. Zhou felt a lingering fear just thinking about it. Although he didn't have a good impression of Tianzhua, it would be too much to wipe out the Yin family. Furthermore, his father, Ouyang Lan, and Sheng and company were here. In the future, when companion beasts advance to the calamity grade, I have to place them in the chaos space. Zhou didn't know when the soul reflection mirror would fully evolve, nor did he dare pry into the chaos space. All he could do was wait. Zhou carefully recalled the entire process of the soul reflection mirror's advancement. Before he could figure out why it had suddenly advanced to the calamity grade, he saw Sheng walk into the garden. "Young master, someone has entered the Venus dimensional zone again," and Sheng said. "Who is it?" Zhou knew that the person was likely an acquaintance from Sheng's expression. "An immortal of the League of Defender," and Sheng replied. Zhou didn't tell anyone that Jiang Yin was an immortal, so Sheng didn't know that the immortal was Jiang Yin. However, even if he knew, Jiang Yan's hostile relationship with the Yin family wouldn't change much. This was because Zhou already knew that Jiang Yin was Cave Era's younger brother. As for Cave Era and Yusuji now, they came from overseas. Jiang Yin was likely from overseas as well. He was also hostile to the Federation. Jiang Yin had probably not come to Sunset College to study. It was very likely that he was a spy. Zhou and Sheng went to the Rubik's Cube together to watch Jiang Yin challenge it again. By the time Zhou arrived at the cube, Jiang Yin had already entered the Venus dimensional zone and killed all the metal guards. The first golden battle god was about to come out. Jiang Yin didn't come personally the last time the people from the League of Defender challenged the checkpoint. This time, only Jiang Yin came. After the golden battle god appeared, he attacked Jiang Yin. Frost bullets shot at him at the speed of light. Jiang Yin was still wearing the Heaven Immortal armor. He didn't wear the Immortal Burial armor. However, just the Heaven Immortal armor was rather terrifying. When the frost bullets hit the Heaven Immortal armor, they exploded like ice fog, but they failed to damage the Heaven Immortal armor at all. As expected of a Calamity Grade Guardian, Zhou was secretly envious. And Sheng had obtained 5 golden battle god companion beasts from Zhou, so he naturally knew how powerful the golden battle god was. Seeing that the frost bullets couldn't injure the immortal, he immediately exclaimed, "Calamity Grade? The guardian of the immortal has advanced to the Calamity Grade. Is there a need to be so surprised? The League of Defender has taken so many resources from the dimension. Isn't it normal for it to advance to the Calamity level?" Zhou said guiltily. He didn't dare say that Jiang Yin had advanced to the Calamity level because of him. And Sheng suddenly turned to look at Zhou and sized him up. "Why are you looking at me?" Zhou forced himself to calm down. "Young master, didn't you make a trip to the League of Defender previously?" But I didn't hear you mention that the immortal is at the calamity grade. And Sheng said as he stared at Zhou Wen. This isn't something glorious for me. What's there to say? Zhou Wen said. No, this isn't like you, young master. When you saw that the immortal was at the calamity grade, your emotions didn't change at all. You should have known long ago. It's obvious that you must have seen him in the League of Defender. To be able to return intact after seeing a calamity grade immortal. There's a huge problem with the immortal not coming to Luoyang to cause trouble. And Sheng said slowly as he stared at Zhou Wen. What problem can there be? Zhou Wen said, pretending not to care. And Sheng seemed to see through Zhou Wen's thoughts as he revealed a strange smile. With your temper, young master, you will definitely warn us if there's really danger. However, you didn't mention anything about the immortal being at the calamity grade. It means that you don't think it's a threat. However, how can a calamity grade immortal not be a threat? I think there are only two possibilities. One is that your strength has already exceeded a calamity grade immortal. The immortal isn't your match, so he naturally doesn't dare to cause trouble in Luoyang. There's no need to warn him. Another possibility is that you know the immortal and know that the immortal won't attack you or Luoyang, so you didn't say anything. Zhou Wen looked at Sheng with a complicated expression as he thought to himself, could it be that Sheng is a bug in my stomach? He guessed everything. And Sheng continued, young master, you are more cautious. Even if you have the ability to defeat the immortal, you should have warned him. I think the latter is more likely. Young master, are you really familiar with the immortal? Is it convenient for you to tell me who he is? And Sheng seemed to have turned his doubts into certainty as he pressed. Since you're so good at guessing, go ahead and guess for yourself, Zhou Wen said expressionlessly. I can't guess. Young master, you are the best. You have a wide network and have friends all over the world, and Sheng said with his head lowered. When Zhou Wen heard Sheng's words, he knew that Sheng had most likely guessed it. As Zhou Wen's social circle wasn't wide, he only knew a few people, so it wasn't difficult to guess. Zhou Wen pretended not to hear him, and continued watching Jiang Yin clear the stage. The golden battle god was blasted apart with a wave of a mortal's hand. The golden battle god that appeared next was the same. It couldn't injure the immortal at all. All of them were blasted apart with a wave of his hand. None of this was surprising. What Zhou Wen really wanted to know was how Jiang Yin planned on dealing with the seventh fatal strike. Do I have to reach the Golden Palace before the seventh strike? As Zhou Wen pondered, Immortal had already walked into the open passageway. His speed didn't look fast. Every step was like a normal person's walk, but with one step, his body had already traversed an extremely great distance. His speed was faster than the average Terrorgrade running at full speed. The first shot finally sounded. When everyone saw it clearly, they realized that Immortal had a bullet between his fingers. He had actually used his fingers to catch a calamity grade attack. Chapter 1399. Gunshots constantly sounded. 6 consecutive shots were caught by Immortal's fingers, but they didn't stop him from advancing at all. Others thought that Immortal's guardian was extremely powerful, but Zhou Wen knew that this fellow still had immortal burial hidden in his body. In fact, it was the power of 2 guardians. Furthermore, it was a double calamity. It was naturally not something an ordinary calamity-grade creature could compare with. However, Zhou Wen still wanted to know how Jiang Yin was going to deal with the 7th bullet. The 7th bullet wasn't something that could be blocked with strength. Unless Jiang Yin's strength had already exceeded that of a calamity, it was naturally impossible. The other factions were also paying attention to Immortal. Many people were alarmed, especially the factions that had once been enemies with the League of Defender. They wished that Immortal would die in the Venus Dimensional Zone. After all, the various factions didn't have any calamity-grade combat strength. A calamity grade, like Immortal, was like a nuclear bomb. Who wouldn't be afraid? In the Venus Dimensional Zone, Jiang Yin had already arrived in front of the Golden Palace before the calamity shot the 7th shot. All he needed to do was step onto the steps to successfully pass. However, Jiang Yin didn't step onto the steps. Instead, he stopped in front of the steps, clearly waiting for the 7th shot to kill. Bam! The 7th shot finally sounded. Everyone widened their eyes as they stared intently at Jiang Yin, wanting to see how he would deal with the seventh bullet. When everyone saw the seventh bullet, it had already shot into Jiang Yin's palm. Even the Sky Immortal armor couldn't completely block the seventh bullet. The bullet was like a drill bit as sparks and lightning tore through the Sky Immortal armor. It continued drilling in and was about to penetrate Jiang Yin's palm. However, in the next second, Jiang Yin closed his fingers and grabbed the bullet. Sparks shot out from the gaps between his fingers, but the bullet ultimately failed to rush out. Jiang Yin held the bullet and walked up the steps. He opened the door to the Golden Palace, and the metal ball flew out. The scene switched back to the rankings. Everyone stared at the rankings, wanting to know Immortal's ranking. Based on Immortal's performance, his ranking definitely wouldn't be low. He had grabbed a calamity-grade bullet with his bare hands, and it was the seventh bullet that would kill. Even the Dragon Turtle's defense couldn't withstand it, but Immortal had done it. Others might not know, but Zhou knew that the Sky Immortal had failed to block the seventh bullet that would have killed him. Jiang Yin had still used Immortal Burial, so the bullet was probably resisting the power of Immortal Burial. Judging from the final scene, Zhang Xian was not able to completely suppress the bullet. 5 stars. It's 5 stars. Someone exclaimed. Xian's name appeared on the ranking list, followed by 5 shining golden stars. Furthermore, Immortal's name actually surpassed Tsukumi's despite both being 5 stars, becoming first on the rankings. This ranking made a lot of people very uncomfortable. After all, many factions were secretly competing with the League of Defender. From their point of view, the League of Defender was a lackey of the dimension. Xian had advanced to the Calamity level and even obtained first place on the rankings. This was a greater blow to ordinary people than Tsukuyami obtaining first place. This was especially so for those humans who had worked hard and even risked their lives to use mythical fluid or spirit casting. At this moment, they felt as if a huge rock was pressing down on their hearts. Zhou didn't feel anything. After the previous battle, he realized that guardians weren't necessarily tools of the dimension. Just like the Guardians of the Cave era and Jiang Yan's Guardians, although they were created in the dimension, they were born on Earth. They had their own independent thoughts, and the dimension couldn't completely control them. Thinking back to a guardian like the Drought Demon Goddess, it wasn't that easy for the dimension to control her. Of course, although Zhou Wen's view of guardians had changed a little, it didn't mean that he wanted to contract a guardian. He had been used to being alone since he was young. Companion beasts like Demonic Neonate and Banana Fairy were already a part of his body, so he didn't feel too repulsed. However, guardians were independent individuals. Zhou Wen wasn't used to having such an existence inseparable from him. He was also afraid that his secrets would be exposed. After this battle, the reputation of the League of Defender was pushed to the peak once again. Many young people of the new generation had thoughts of contracting a guardian. Compared to the other paths of breaking through to the mythical stage, contracting a guardian was undoubtedly the easiest and the fastest increase in strength. Young master, do you plan on obtaining the Venus companion beast? Ensheng suddenly asked. Zhou Wen saw that Ensheng's expression was very serious when he spoke. It was rare to see him speak like this, so he asked, I've thought about it, but I don't know if I can succeed. If it's possible, take first place now. Ensheng said seriously. Why now? Zhou Wen asked in puzzlement. Because humans need confidence. Humans these days lack confidence. Ensheng's expression was solemn as he continued. In this era, most humans are at a loss. They don't know how to take the fork in the road. At this moment, someone needs to stand up and give them a push. However, this person might push them onto a different path. Now that an immortal has stepped forward and given many people a push, it might even affect the choice of a generation's future path. That might not be the wrong path, Zhou Wen said after some thought. He didn't believe that contracting a guardian was definitely the wrong path. Ensheng nodded and said with a sigh, Indeed, it might not be the wrong path, but at the very least, we have to let the next generation see that there are other paths they can take and not just that one path. The path might be a good one, but with more people taking it, it will become a single log bridge. Zhou Wen lowered his head and pondered over Ensheng's words. After a while, he looked up and said in enlightenment, "Then let me open up a new path. Young master, all the best." After Sheng received Zhou Wen's affirmation, his expression instantly changed. He looked like a fanboy who was cheering for Zhou Wen. Zhou Wen looked at Sheng and was somewhat at a loss whether to laugh or cry. He suddenly understood Tianzhua. He was clearly very satisfied with Sheng's workability, but he would still give him a warning from time to time. This Sheng was someone who didn't let others have peace. Sometimes, Zhou Wen had the urge to strangle him to death. However, I can only give it a try. It's hard to say what ranking I can obtain. Furthermore, I still need some time to prepare. Zhou Wen didn't know what ranking he could obtain if he did his best. If he wanted to obtain first place, it was best to wait for the soul reflection mirror to complete its evolution. Furthermore, Zhou Wen's self-created skill still had one last step to complete. Since he was going to do it, he had to do it big. Young master, if you need anything, the Sunset Army will definitely support you fully, and Sheng said seriously. If you really want to support me, help me get some companion eggs. You already have the list, Zhou Wen said. And Sheng immediately wore a bitter expression. Young master, I've already scraped the ground. There's really nothing left. Chapter 1400. When the Venus dungeon respawned, Zhou Wen entered it again. This time, he wanted to see if he could crack the seventh bullet. Space-time bandit, sky-stealing, sun-swapping, absolute space, minor heavenly cycle stellar array, and other skills were used according to the routines he had practiced many times. A mini-minor heavenly cycle stellar array formed around Zhou Wen. This minor heavenly cycle stellar array actually used the constellation array as its core. With the augmentation of the spatial skill, it formed a miniature circular space around Zhou Wen. In theory, any attack that entered it would be trapped in the circular space forever. It was as though they had walked into the orbit of the Mobius strip. Of course, in reality, it didn't have such a powerful effect. It only used the technique of an array formation and spatial exchange to make prey that entered fall into an alternate space. When the bullets shot by the metal guards were within 3 feet of Zhou Wen, they immediately circled around Zhou Wen's body instead of shooting in a straight line. A large number of bullets revolved around Zhou Wen like a galaxy. Zhou Wen had already tested it before. Ordinary mythical bullets were indeed unable to break through the restrictions of the circular space. But Zhou Wen wasn't sure if they could block calamity-grade bullets. After killing all the metal guards, the golden battle god appeared. The terror-grade bullets failed to break through Zhou Wen's protective array formation. The bullets could only revolve around his body. After killing the golden battle god, he obtained 2 stat crystals. One was 89 strength, and the other was 91 essence energy. It raised both of Zhou Wen's stats, but he was still a distance away from the limit of 99. As the ear-piercing alarm sounded, Zhou Wen felt somewhat uneasy. He didn't know if he could block a calamity-grade bullet. Bam! A bullet shot out from the tunnel. With Zhou Wen's current strength, he could already see the bullet's trajectory when he activated the disqualified. However, he didn't block it and allowed the bullet to shoot at his body. When the bullet was 3 feet away from his body, it distorted slightly, but it continued forward. This made Zhou Wen's heart sink. Thankfully, the bullet's trajectory finally changed after advancing less than a foot. It circled around Zhou Wen like a satellite. There's hope. Zhou Wen was overjoyed. Bang! Bullets shot over one after another. No matter where they hit, they would eventually turn into satellites that revolved around Zhou Wen. Only when all their strength was expended would they fall. But very quickly, Zhou Wen discovered a problem. The calamity-grade bullets came one after another. Before the force of the bullets in front was completely dissipated, the bullets from behind shot in again. As the number of bullets increased, problems appeared in the circulation space. The distance at which the bullets shot in increased, and they were getting closer and closer to Zhou Wen's body. Bang! When the 5th bullet shot in, the minor heavenly cycle stellar array around Zhou Wen disintegrated. Due to the impact of the alternating space, there was a gap. Without an accurate exchange, the balance was broken, and the entire system instantly collapsed. Before the sixth shot was fired, Zhou quit the game. There was still a problem with his ability. If he didn't solve it, there would be no benefit in continuing to fight. Only 5 bullets were enough to cause problems in the alternate space. I didn't even see the 7th bullet. This skill seems to be very problematic. Zhou's goal had always been to kill the calamity creatures on Venus, not just to clear the level. Zhou changed dungeons and constantly used skill combinations in-game, hoping to figure out where the problem lay. After studying it for a long time, Zhou finally figured out the problem. This was because Zhou's alternate space was a combination skill formed by several skills. Once there was a deviation in the skill combination, its stability would be affected. It was very easy for the skill combination to break or even collapse. After trying a few times, he wanted to perfect and optimize the skill combination, but the outcome wasn't ideal. Once it suffered a strong impact, the skill combination would more or less fluctuate. This was something that couldn't be completely avoided. The 7th bullet has a continuous attack characteristic, but my skill combination can't withstand too much pressure. In other words, it's impossible for me to block the 7th bullet. Zhou was somewhat vexed. Now that he knew that this combination could form an alternate space, it couldn't withstand the calamity-grade bullets. All Zhou could do was continue thinking of a solution. Since the gap between the skill combinations can't be avoided, I'll fuse them into one skill. After some thought, Zhou realized that this was the only way. What's Zhou doing? Why haven't I seen him recently? Ouyang called Sheng over and asked. Young Master seems to be studying something recently. He hasn't left his room for days, and Sheng answered. Ouyang looked at the empty dining table and sighed. I clearly have a husband, 2 sons, and a daughter, but there's no one to eat with me. What's going on? Madam, Uncle Zhou went out again? And Sheng asked. That's right. The Duga family discovered a historical site in a dimensional zone. They don't recognize some words, so they invited him to take a look, Ouyang said. Didn't you discuss it with young Master before going? And Sheng whispered. It's not like you don't know his temper. He usually does whatever I say, but once there are those strange ancient texts, he won't listen to anything I say. I can't do anything about him, Ouyang said helplessly. Although the Dugu family has a good relationship with us, Uncle Zhou's identity is special. If he's used by someone, it will be very disadvantageous to young Master It's best to be careful. If you really don't want to trouble young Master I can get someone to accompany Uncle Zhou, and Sheng said. Ouyang said with a bitter smile, It's useless. I've sent people to protect him, but if the Dugu family really wants to touch him, how can ordinary people stop them? Unless he doesn't go out, this isn't something that can be done just by sending people to protect him. Fortunately, up until now, they had not encountered any major incidents. After all, he's only a scholar. His cultivation is very ordinary, so ordinary people won't make things difficult for him. And Sheng also knew that this matter wasn't easy. After some thought, he didn't seem to have a good solution. If he didn't let Zhou Lingfeng out, what was the difference between letting him go to jail? However, he couldn't let Zhou follow him 24 hours a day, right? Ordinary guards would not be of much use if they encountered a strong enemy. Go and see how little one is doing. If he's free, get in to have a meal with me and chat. Don't stay cooped up in the house all day. He'll be depressed later, Ouyang said. I'll go now. And Sheng agreed and turned to leave the hall, heading for Zhou's courtyard. Chapter 1401. When Sheng arrived at Zhou's yard, he realized that Jade Rabbit and Banana Fairy were in the yard, but he didn't see Zhou. Is young Master around? And Sheng knocked on the door and attracted Banana Fairy's attention before saying. Banana Fairy nodded before shaking her head. This action was very confusing, but Sheng understood what she meant. Zhou was here, but he couldn't see him. What's young Master doing? He hasn't come out for days. And Sheng was somewhat curious, but it wasn't convenient for him to disturb him. All he could do was leave. Just as he walked for a short distance, he suddenly heard a strange sound coming from the yard. He couldn't help but stop, turn around, and jump up. He landed on the wall and looked into the yard. After seeing the situation inside, and Sheng was alarmed. He saw that Zhou Wen's house was spinning crazily like a huge top. "Young master, are you all right?" And Sheng immediately jumped into the yard and shouted at the house. No one answered him. The house was still spinning rapidly, and it was spinning faster and faster. And Sheng gritted his teeth as his body shimmered with a strange glow. He held a golden battle god spear in each hand and took the opportunity to rush in. And Sheng's grasp of timing was truly impressive. Under the rapid spinning, he grabbed the moment the door flashed by and slammed it open, entering the spinning house. "What's going on?" And Sheng landed in the house and realized that everything inside was still. It was completely different from what it looked like outside. However, what was strange was that the originally square room had turned into a curved shape. Furthermore, standing in the room, he could only see less than half of the room. Then, it was as though he was isolated by some mysterious force. He couldn't see anything. He clearly felt that there should be something there, but he couldn't see it. "Young master." And Sheng called out a few more times, but he still didn't receive a response. He walked to the side of the curved room, hoping to find something. The room wasn't big, but after walking for a while, and Sheng realized that he seemed to be spinning in circles. He paced around and was still near the door. Space elemental powers? And Sheng immediately rushed to the door, hoping to rush out. However, when he rushed out of the room, he realized that he was not in the courtyard. In front of him was still the room from before. And Sheng's expression immediately changed. He turned his head, and indeed, the door was behind him. He gritted his teeth and rushed out the door again, only to see the same room. And Sheng tried several times, but the outcome was the same. No matter which direction he charged out from, even if he smashed through the wall, he was still in the room. The entire room was like a sealed space cage, trapping him in it forever. Boom! And Sheng's expression kept changing. Just as he was thinking of a way to escape, he heard a rumble. Then, the curved room returned to normal. The space that couldn't be seen previously could now be seen. Zhou Wen was sitting in front of his desk, gaming on his phone. "Young master, what happened?" And Sheng was pleasantly surprised as he hurriedly went forward and asked, What happened?" "I've been gaming and didn't notice anything," Zhou Wen said as he put away his phone. "This room just now." And Sheng didn't know how to describe it. "Oh, maybe I was too engrossed in gaming and was a little agitated. I accidentally exerted force on my body and caused some damage to the room." "Don't worry, it's not an enemy invasion," Zhou Wen said. And Sheng looked at Zhou Wen with an odd expression, momentarily at a loss for words. "Ah, Sheng, why are you looking for me?" Zhou Wen asked. "Madam said that if you have the time, you should accompany her for a meal. The overseer isn't home, and Miss Jing has been working hard on her cultivation. Uncle Zhou has also gone out, leaving Madam alone at home. She can't help but feel worried. Young master, if you have the time, spend more time with her," and Sheng said. "Then let's go," Zhou Wen said as he stood up. He was in a good mood because he had finally successfully created a new skill. It wasn't just a combination of skills. Although he hadn't tested it, Zhou Wen was certain that his skill could trap the calamity-grade bullet. As he walked, Zhou Wen glanced at his phone stats. In the skill column, a new skill had indeed appeared. Small Heavenly Cycle Annihilation Array. Calamity Grade. Rank 10. Calamity Grade? Zhou Wen wasn't surprised. He had experimented with it countless times in-game, so he knew that the effects of this skill had indeed exceeded the Terror grade. The only flaw of the Small Heavenly Cycle Annihilation Array was that it required a certain amount of time to accumulate strength. Although this time wasn't considered long, it was very difficult to use it in real combat. It had to be released in advance. However, to Zhou Wen, this was enough. Releasing the Small Heavenly Cycle Annihilation Array in advance was enough for him to challenge the Venus dungeon. This was a powerful weapon for clearing dungeons. In the face of sudden situations, he wouldn't be able to react in time. When the Venus dungeon respawned, Zhou Wen experimented again. If he succeeded, he could directly challenge the Rubik's Cube ranking in reality. After accompanying Ouyang Lan for a meal, she grumbled to Zhou Wen about Tianzhua and company. Zhou Wen knew that she was worried. In this era, even an expert like Tianzhua couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't perish. Zhou wasn't good at comforting others, so he could only listen by the side. After the meal, he returned to his room. Zhou attempted to sink his divine sense into the chaos bead to see if the soul reflection mirror had completed its evolution. This time, Zhou was prepared. He kept his divine sense far away from the soul reflection mirror. The space in the chaos bead was very large and almost infinite. It was impossible for the seven-colored light emitted by the soul reflection mirror to illuminate every area. Indeed, Zhou divine sense wasn't injured by the soul reflection mirror. However, he could see from afar that an area was enveloped by the seven-colored light. He couldn't see anything in that area. From the looks of it, the evolution hasn't been completed. Zhou checked the items in the chaos space. Thankfully, Zhou had deliberately placed the soul reflection mirror in a relatively distant space, so it didn't cause any damage to the other items in the chaos bead. Zhou roughly looked through it, but when he saw Explosive Fiend Man, he was taken aback. Explosive Fiend Man had previously been interested in the metal, so Zhou had placed him in the chaos space with the metal. At that moment, Explosive Fiend Man looked like a metal robot. It was completely wrapped in a metal shell, only carrying two transparent crystal jars on its back. One could see a strange purple liquid inside the jars. The purple liquid bubbled like boiling water, giving off the feeling that it would explode at any moment. Chapter 1402. When did this guy evolve? Zhou didn't see the metal parts. When he sensed Explosive Fiend Man's aura, he realized that he had already reached the Terror grade. He summoned Explosive Fiend Man back and used his phone to look at his information. Explosive Fiend Man, Terror grade, evolvable, life providence, lawless life soul, destroyer wheel of destiny, destruction terraform, space-time Fiend Man strength, 82 speed, 82 constitution, 82 essence energy, 82 talent skill, death list, time blast companion form, self-destruct device Zhou when carefully studied his stats. The power of the Wheel of Destiny had a strong augmentation to explosive power, greatly increasing its destructive power. As for the space-time Fiend Man's Terror Transformation ability, it probably had a lot to do with the metal parts. After carefully studying the space-time Fiend Man's description, Zhou was pleasantly surprised to discover that this was Explosive Fiend Man's most terrifying ability. Space-time Fiend Man actually had an ability similar to Resurrection, but it wasn't a true resurrection. Perhaps it was more accurate to call it replication, but it wasn't completely accurate. To put it simply, after Explosive Fiend Man used the self-destruct device, he could still resurrect. Or rather, Explosive Fiend Man from another space-time would come to this space-time and replace the previous Explosive Fiend Man. Unfortunately, only one Explosive Fiend Man could exist in the same space-time. Therefore, this was equivalent to a resurrection skill. With such a terror transformation ability, Explosive Fiend Man is equivalent to a boss that can self-destruct infinitely. If I don't like anyone, I can just charge forward and self-destruct. Zhou knew how terrifying Explosive Fiend Man's self-destruction was. It was a one-time eruption of all the energy in his body. It was very difficult for creatures of the same level to withstand such a self-destruction. Zhou entered the game excitedly, wanting to see how strong Explosive Fiend Man was. Before the Venus dungeon opened, Zhou took Explosive Fiend Man to Yang City, planning on using the Blood Spirits as a test subject. When the Blood Spirit appeared, Explosive Fiend Man charged forward under Zhou's orders. Zhou realized that his actions seemed to have some effect of shrinking space or accelerating time. He became very fast. When Explosive Fiend Man rushed past the Sanguine Spirit, he pressed his hand on the Sanguine Spirit and installed a time bomb on it. After he pulled away, the time bomb exploded and blew the Sanguine Spirit into pieces. This fellow was simply a punctual bomb installer. Anything that was touched by his hands would turn into a bomb and detonate its own energy. Zhou also noticed that when Explosive Fiend Man's fingers touched something, there would be purple liquid staining it. It was likely the liquid in the bottle behind him. It was the liquid that turned the things he touched into bombs. This guy is quite strong. Zhou was delighted. Unless their speed was faster than the explosive fiend man, and he couldn't touch them, or their defense was strong enough to make the purple liquid useless, anyone he touched would die. Let's try the self-destruct device. Zhou made explosive fiend man charge at a blood spirit. As explosive fiend man hugged a blood spirit, his body turned into a self-destruct device and enveloped the blood spirit's body. In the next second, there was a loud explosion. A purple sun rose up in Yang City, engulfing a large area. Wherever the power of the explosion passed, everything was destroyed and turned into ashes. Damn, so fierce. The power of this self-destruction is almost close to the calamity grade. Zhou was already overjoyed as he couldn't close his mouth. However, Zhou was somewhat depressed. Although the space-time Fiend Man had played a role, Explosive Fiend Man couldn't be revived immediately. He had to wait for 24 hours. Forget it. 24 hours is good as long as I can revive. Otherwise, the self-destruct device will be a useless skill. I don't dare use it in real life. I finally don't have so many qualms now. Zhou was very satisfied. When it was time for the Venus dungeon to respawn, Zhou entered the dungeon again and activated the minor heavenly cycle formation. When the calamity grade bullets arrived in front of Zhou, they immediately circled around his body. The first 6 bullets didn't affect Zhou at all. Instead, their energy was absorbed by Zhou, and they quickly fell to the ground. The 7th bullet also failed to pass through the minor heavenly cycle formation. It kept spinning in the formation, and its power was absorbed by the minor heavenly cycle formation and transmitted to Zhou. Due to the rapid loss of energy, after a period of time, the almost never-ending 7th bullet finally fell to the ground. I've finally succeeded. Zhou quickly teleported in the tunnel, hoping to find the calamity grade. Now that the bullets couldn't injure him, as long as he could find the calamity grade, there was a high chance of killing him. According to Zhou's guess, the calamity grade's body definitely wasn't strong. Perhaps he didn't need a powerful weapon to kill him. However, Zhou constantly teleported in the tunnel, but he failed to find any traces of the calamity grade. Every time he rushed towards the spot where the bullets came from, he didn't even find a shadow. Zhou didn't know how many calamity grade bullets he had suffered, but he still failed to find the calamity creature. He thought of all sorts of methods and used Truth Listener's ability to its limits, but he still couldn't find his location. This calamity grade's body definitely isn't strong. As long as I can find him, killing him shouldn't be difficult. Zhou was increasingly certain that his previous guess was correct. Unfortunately, he couldn't find him. Even if he knew that he could kill him, it was useless. Although I can't find anyone, the minor heavenly cycle killing array should be enough to clear the levels. I wonder what my ranking will be. Zhou wasn't sure what his ranking would be if he cleared the levels in such a manner. From a practical point of view, his method of clearing the levels was actually the same as using the heavenly robes to clear the levels. It was to prevent the bullets from hitting him. Therefore, in theory, if he couldn't kill the calamity creature, it was very likely that he would only obtain 3 stars like before. No, I have to think of a way to kill him no matter what. If I don't get first place, what's the point of getting on the rankings? After some thought, Zhou felt that it was meaningless to get 3 stars. If he wanted to get it, he would get first place. Young master, someone wants to buy the heavenly robes at high price. Unfortunately, he isn't from the League of Defender. And Sheng called. Is the price offered very high? Zhou had previously told Sheng that he wanted to sell the heavenly robes to the League of Defender. For Sheng to call under such circumstances meant that the price offered was probably very extraordinary. Very high. And Sheng emphasized his words. Who wants to buy it? What's the price? Zhou asked again. The Cape family. The starting price is enough for us to use the accelerator. We can discuss the exact price when we meet, and Sheng said. All right, let's meet and talk. Zhou was originally determined to sell it to the League of Defender, but now he didn't have such a strong need. It was the same selling it to anyone. As for the Cape family, they had always been at odds with Zhou. Zhou didn't mind letting them bleed a little. Chapter 1403. The Cape family also knew that their grudge with Zhou Wen ran deep, so they planned on buying the heavenly robes at a high price. Zhou Wen came to the meeting room and met the person from the Cape family who had come to negotiate. That person's name was Wood. He wasn't a direct descendant of the Cape family. According to Ensheng, Wood's ancestor was the Cape family's steward. Later on, he slowly became a member of the Cape family. Mr. Zhou, you're really young and promising. I've long wanted to meet you. Today, my wish has finally been fulfilled. When Wood saw Zhou Wen and Ensheng stand up, he immediately stood up and walked over to shake Zhou Wen's hand. Mr. Wood, you're too polite. Let's get down to business. Zhou Wen shook Wood's hand before walking to the main seat and sitting down. Ensheng and another officer sat on either side of Zhou Wen. All right, I'll be direct. Mr. Zhou, can you name a price for your heavenly robes? It's also good for us to know if we have the capital to buy the heavenly robes. If we do, we can have a good discussion. If we don't have the capital, there's no need for us to waste time. Don't you think so? Wood said, 1,000 tons of essence crystals. That's my bottom line, not a gram less. Before Zhou Wen came, he had already discussed it with Ensheng. He originally imagined that Wood and the other representatives would bargain. After all, 1,000 tons of essence crystals was too much. Even Zhou Wen felt that it was impossible to sell it at that price. However, to his surprise, Wood didn't bargain. He agreed immediately. Sure, we're willing to use 1,000 tons of essence crystals to exchange for the heavenly robes. That's good. When will the deal be made? Zhou Wen and Ensheng exchanged looks, feeling that this matter definitely wasn't that simple. Indeed, Wood said, but that's how it is. Mr. Zhou, Adjutant, you should know that 1,000 tons of essence crystals is just too huge. Ignoring our Cape family, even if the 6 families join forces, it's still unknown if we can gather so many essence crystals. Then what did you mean by sure? Are you messing with me? Zhou Wen deliberately said with a sullen expression. How would I dare to mess with you, Mr. Zhou? We do have 1,000 tons of essence crystals. We are also willing to use 1,000 tons of essence crystals to buy the heavenly robes. However, you need to dig them yourself, Wood said. What do you mean? Zhou Wen frowned. It's like this. We really can't take out 1,000 tons of origin crystals, but we do have a good origin crystal mine. Moreover, the origin crystal reserves will definitely not be less than 1,000 tons. It might even be 2,000 or 3,000 tons. Wood's voice was very provocative. You mean to say that you want to trade the primordial crystal mine for my heavenly robe? Do you think we have the ability to dig for primordial crystal ores in the West District? Zhou Wen frowned. Mr. Zhou, don't worry. The primordial crystal mine I mentioned isn't in the West District. It's in the East District. However, apart from our Cape family, no one knows the location of the primordial crystal mine. However, we've already explored the area, and there are definitely more than 1,000 tons of yuan crystal deposits there. If you don't believe me, you can bring professionals to explore the primordial crystal mine during the transaction. After confirming the reserves of the primordial crystal mine, you can give it to us, Wood said. Mr. Wood, that's not what we said previously. We've always been talking about spot transactions, Ensheng said. Of course, if we have 1,000 tons of primordial crystals, we will definitely want to buy the heavenly robe. But in fact, the primordial crystals we can produce now are only about 800 tons. We really can't afford such a huge amount. If possible, we can use money or companion beasts to repay the debt, Wood said sincerely. How about this? We didn't know about your suggestion before. We need to have another meeting to study it. How about we continue discussing it tomorrow? Ensheng said, Of course. We sincerely hope that we can complete this transaction. Wood and company left the meeting room. The Cape family sure is scheming. They want to use the primordial crystal mine in the East District to exchange for the heavenly robe. This is equivalent to them making a deal without any capital. They definitely can't mine the mine on a large scale. Over time, it will definitely be discovered by others. Sooner or later, it won't belong to them, Ensheng said with a cold snort after they left. Do you mean we shouldn't trade? Zhou Wen said to Ensheng. No. If you agree, young Master One, it's best we continue the transaction. Although the mine is in our East District, We don't know where it is. We can't guarantee that our people will discover it first in the future. Therefore, if we can exchange it, we have to get it back. However, before that, we have to ensure that the mine can be mined safely and that it can be transported back safely. And Sheng gave a straightforward answer. Zhou understood what Sheng meant. Most of the primordial crystal mines were in dimensional zones. If the dimensional zone was too dangerous, humans wouldn't be able to stay there for long. No matter how many primordial crystals they had, it would be useless. Also, if the primordial crystal mine was too far from Luoyang and in an area that Luoyang couldn't take care of, it would be easy for others to snatch it away, even if it was mined. In that case, I'll leave the negotiation to you. Zhou didn't wish to waste time on such matters. He still had many things to do. Now that he had advanced to the Terror grade, he needed a plan to advance to the Calamity grade. His stats definitely had to be raised first. However, if he only raised his stats, even if he reached the limits of the Terror grade, he definitely wouldn't be able to advance to the Calamity grade. Zhou had previously seen a few advancements to the Calamity grade. Tsukuyami had relied on the power of a dimensional zone to advance to the Calamity grade. When she advanced to the Calamity grade, the dimensional zone almost collapsed due to excessive expenditure. Also, Jiang Yan's Heaven Immortal and Burial Immortal had advanced to the Calamity grade with the help of the power of a perfect Sword Immortal. When it came to Zhou Wen's Soul Reflection Mirror, he could clearly sense that a powerful energy had been injected into it, allowing it to advance to the Calamity level. Zhou Wen concluded that advancing to the Calamity grade required a massive amount of energy. Furthermore, this energy wasn't ordinary essence energy. No matter how much essence energy one had, it was impossible for them to advance to the Calamity grade. Now, Zhou Wen hoped that a Calamity grade would appear in a dimensional zone. When the time came, he could observe how dimensional creatures use the power of dimensional zones to advance to the Calamity grade. Zhou Wen vaguely felt that he might be able to learn from their methods and use the power of dimensional zones to advance to the Calamity grade. Dimensional zone, Calamity domain. No matter how I think about it, there's a connection between the two. Perhaps dimensional zones are the key to my advancement to the Calamity grade. Zhou Wen thought to himself, but as he hadn't heard of any calamities recently, he didn't have the chance to observe them even if he wanted to. In the next few days, Sheng kept negotiating with Wood and Company, but Wood and Company weren't willing to give in on some key issues. The negotiations didn't make any progress. Finally, Wood raised a condition. He wanted Zhou Wen to barge into the Venus dimensional zone again without using any other companion beasts. He could only use the heavenly robe. If Zhou Wen could clear it, they were willing to give in. Chapter 1404. From the looks of it, the Cape family had doubts about the effects of the heavenly robes from the beginning. They had long planned to make this request at such a time. We have already discussed to this point. If we don't agree to this condition that seems beneficial to us now, it's equivalent to telling them that there's a problem with the heavenly robes. When the time comes, I'm afraid no one will buy our heavenly robes again. But if we agree, and Sheng paused for a moment before Zhou Wen continued, then agree to them. And Sheng was taken aback. Young master, didn't you say that the effects of the heavenly robes can only be unleashed with a companion beast with high luck? Now that the Cape family requests that we only use the heavenly robes, how do we pass the test? That's not a problem. If they want to see the heavenly robes, let them see it. Ignoring the fact that we only use the heavenly robes. Even if we don't use the heavenly robes, we can still achieve the same effects, Zhou Wen said. I see. That's great. In that case, I have to work harder. And Sheng's eyes revealed a chilling glint. Zhou Wen knew that leaving such matters to Sheng wouldn't be wrong. He wouldn't suffer a loss. All he needed to do was prepare to clear the level. In just a day, Sheng had finished discussing with Wood and Company. Zhou Wen could clear the level, but apart from the primordial crystal mine, the Cape family needed to provide an additional 100 tons of primordial crystals. These 100 tons of primordial crystals were equivalent to a deposit. After Zhou Wen completed the test, he would hand over the primordial crystal mine. Under in Sheng's arrangement, Zhou Wen signed a contract with the Cape family's representative. If Zhou Wen couldn't clear the Venus dimensional zone and reach the rankings with the heavenly robes alone, he would have to pay 100 tons of primordial crystals and pay compensation for the breach of contract. The moment the contract was signed, the Cape family released the contents of the contract through their official channels. If Zhou Wen couldn't do it and refused to refund the deposit, the entire Federation wouldn't know of this matter. Even if the Yin family didn't refund the primordial crystals, it would deal a huge blow to Zhou Wen and the Yin family's reputation in Luoyang. Even if he refunded the deposit, he would still suffer a considerable loss and blow. No matter what, Zhou Wen had to clear it this time. Zhou Wen actually agreed to the Cape family's request. Xia Luchuan was very surprised after reading the content posted by the Cape family. Anyone would think that a heavenly robe transformed from a terror-grade companion beast could perfectly withstand a calamity-grade attack. This was clearly unbelievable. There had to be other supplementary means and the augmentation of companion beasts to reach such a level. Many people had the same thoughts as Xia Luchuan. After Zhang Chuanxiu read it, he revealed a thoughtful expression. Clearly, he didn't believe that he could clear the Venus dimensional zone with just a terror-grade heavenly robe. However, Zhou Wen had agreed to such a request. This puzzled Zhang Chuanxiu. With the same question, many people paid attention to the magic cube, wanting to see how Zhou Wen would deal with it. Zhou Wen didn't make them wait too long. Soon, the Rubik's Cube lit up, and the image of the platform outside the Venus dimensional zone appeared. Dressed in the heavenly robe, Zhou Wen stood on the platform. Zhou Wen was only wearing a heavenly robe. Apart from that, he didn't have anything else on him. He didn't even have any rings or other accessories. It was rare for him to be clean. It's really here. Could it be that the heavenly robe is really so effective against the calamity creatures on Venus? Upon seeing Zhou Wen's attire, it was obvious that he didn't plan on using any other companion beasts. Xia Luchuan still found it unbelievable. The Cape family paid more attention to this battle. If the heavenly robe could really perfectly dodge a calamity-grade attack, they naturally wanted it. Ignoring the value of reaching the rankings, just dodging a calamity-grade attack was priceless. However, they were also very suspicious. If there was really such a powerful ability, why would Zhou Wen want to sell it? Although the reason given by the Yin family was reasonable, they were still somewhat suspicious. Zhou Wen dripped his blood and activated the Venus dimensional zone. Everyone watched as he entered the dimensional zone. Upon seeing the metal guard, Zhou Wen summoned Sword Pill and killed it with one strike. A large number of metal guards rushed out and were killed by Zhou Wen in the blink of an eye. The bullets they fired couldn't injure Zhou Wen at all. After the golden battle god rushed out, the bullets shot out could only circle around Zhou Wen and failed to touch him. Zhou Wen charged straight forward and killed him with a single strike. He didn't even bother dodging the bullets. The 6 golden battle gods were all killed by Zhou Wen, and a companion egg dropped. It left people envious. Zhou Wen put away the companion egg and rushed into the tunnel. Zhang Yuji and company, who were watching the Magic Cube's live stream, couldn't help but feel nervous. After all, it was still doubtful if the Terror-grade heavenly robe could withstand a calamity-grade bullet alone. Bang! After the gunshot, a calamity-grade bullet appeared around Zhou Wen and circled around him like lightning. It looked very similar to the previous times Zhou Wen had cleared the levels. It was even stronger. Previously, it was only the sure-kill bullet that circled around Zhou Wen. Now, even the first bullet had such a situation. Zhou Wen ignored the bullet as he quickly tore through the tunnel and headed for the Golden Palace. Bang! Bang! Gunshots sounded repeatedly as bullets appeared around Zhou Wen, but they could only circle around him. They failed to injure him or stop him from advancing. Zhou Wen was very fast. Before the 7th bullet was fired, he had already arrived in front of the Golden Palace. However, Zhou Wen stopped in front of the stairs like the immortal. He didn't ascend the Golden Palace, but waited for the 7th bullet to arrive. Bang! The 7th shot finally sounded. A bullet appeared around Zhou when with lightning sparks. It was more dazzling than the halo formed by the other 6 bullets. Zhou stood there without moving, allowing the 7 bullets to circle him. That heavenly robe can actually perfectly restrain calamity-grade bullets. It wasn't just the Cape family. Many people who were very interested in the heavenly robe widened their eyes. That wasn't the end. Zhou Wen, who had proven the heavenly robe's ability, still hadn't left. The calamity-grade bullets kept shooting over, but none of them could injure Zhou Wen. When a second round of bullets circled Zhou Wen, the phones of the overseer's office, as well as the phones of Ensheng and the other upper echelons, were about to explode. Zhou Wen didn't use any other companion beasts, nor did he use any offensive or defensive means. This undoubtedly meant that the heavenly robe was the best of the best. It had an unbelievable dodging ability. Obtaining it would not only allow one to rise in the rankings, but it would also ensure one's safety. Who wouldn't want a capable person? Instantly, the phones of the overseer office were busier than the after-sales service of a certain brand. At that moment, Zhou Wen had finally walked up the stairs and arrived in front of the Golden Palace. What happened next made people even crazier. Zhou Wen's name appeared on the rankings, but it wasn't 3 stars. Behind his name were 5 shining golden stars. Furthermore, he was ranked first, squeezing a mortal who had just taken first place a few days ago. Thankfully, the calls couldn't be made at the same time. Otherwise, the phones of the overseer office would explode. Chapter 1405. Adjutant. When is it convenient for Mr. Zhou? Let's hand over Tian E as soon as possible. Wood and the other representatives of the Cape family couldn't sit still any longer as they took the initiative to find Ensheng. I'm sorry. There's a problem here. Ensheng wore a troubled expression. What's the problem? Wood asked patiently, but he was already burning with anxiety. After watching Zhou Wen's performance, anyone would believe that Tian E was an excellent grade companion beast. The owner of the Cape family had already given the order to bring Tian E back as soon as possible. Someone offered a higher price than your family. As you know, my young master is already a little impatient with your many requests. Furthermore, he directly gave you the goods. Ensheng said hesitantly, Adjutant, we have a contract. With the in-family status, there's no need to violate the contract for such a small profit, right? Wood immediately turned anxious. He also knew that Tian Yi's display of abilities was too shocking. Furthermore, the magic cube had actually given him a 5-star evaluation, even allowing Zhou Wen to reach the top of the rankings. Who in the entire Federation didn't want Tian E? The headlines of the various media outlets were all about Zhou Wen and Tian E. Anyone with the ability was probably eyeing Tian E. We don't want to break the contract, but you know the power of the League of Defender. Now that they want Tian E, do we dare not give it to them? And Sheng sighed. So what if it's the League of Defender? Even if the immortals come themselves, they have to be reasonable, right? Why don't we do this? Adjutant and quickly invite Mr. Zhou. We will complete the handover as soon as possible. If the people from the League of Defender want to use force, let them cause trouble for our Cape family. Wood said, the risk we're taking is too great. And Sheng looked like he was in a dilemma. Adjutant and help us settle this matter. The Cape family will definitely not mistreat you. This is a token of our Cape family's appreciation. Would stuff something into Ensheng's hands. No. This isn't appropriate, right? Although Ensheng said that, he tilted his body and opened the pocket on his coat with one hand. Wood had already asked for instructions several times in a row. Now, it was not just Wood. The higher-ups of the Cape family were regretting it to death. If he had known that this would happen, he would have just bought the heavenly robe. Yet, he had caused so much trouble, and now the price he had to pay was 10% more than before. Even so, the Cape family was willing to pay. They were afraid that Zhou Wen wouldn't sell the heavenly robes to them. From their point of view, the family needed a large number of essence crystals to use the accelerator. Otherwise, it was impossible for any faction to exchange such companion beasts for essence crystals. In the end, They finally reached an agreement. Even an important member of the Cape family, Woods, rushed over overnight to receive Tian-E personally. As long as we can bring Tian-E back, everything will be worth it. We must be fast. We can't delay any longer. Otherwise, the primordial crystal mine will see the problem. At that time, it will not be so easy to get Tian-E back. When Woods came, the master's advice still rang in his ears. Woods knew that this matter couldn't be delayed. After rushing to Luoyang, he immediately contacted Sheng and Zhou Wen and headed for the primordial crystal mine to make the transaction. The primordial crystal mine wasn't far from Luoyang. What was even more coincidental was that it was near Guide City. The dimensional zone was originally under the jurisdiction of Guide City, but there were no signs of human habitation. There were dimensional zones everywhere. I never expected there to be a primordial crystal mine here. Zhou Wen was no stranger to this place. His grandfather had brought him here a few times when he was young. Back then, it was a mausoleum. Now, it had become a valley at some point in time. There were flowers blooming everywhere in the valley and butterflies fluttering. As there were many dimensional zones nearby, dimensional creatures that had broken the seal appeared everywhere. The nearby humans had long moved away and headed to some relatively large human cities. There was no one nearby. Woods led Zhou Wen and company into the valley. It was unknown when the valley had become a dimensional zone. Strangely, there were only ordinary butterflies in the valley. There wasn't a single dimensional creature. The primordial crystal reserves here are very rich. Furthermore, the primordial crystal mine is very close to the surface. The purity is very high. Woods introduced as he led the way. Soon, everyone saw the exposed primordial crystal ores on the nearby mountain wall. And Sheng hurriedly got an expert to carry out an exploration. The preliminary conclusion was even better than what the Cape family had said. The reserves here were likely far more than a few thousand tons. Woods acted as if nothing had happened, but he was a little uneasy in his heart. He knew that this place looked good, but at a certain time, it would not be as good as it was now. He now hoped that Sheng and company would quickly finish the inspection and complete the handover. He didn't want them to notice anything. Zhou Wen had only taken a casual look and didn't discover any problems. However, Woods' emotions were so intense that it triggered Truth Listener's voice. Soon, Zhou Wen knew that the Cape family didn't have any good intentions. This place wasn't as beautiful and peaceful as it looked. It's no wonder the Cape family doesn't mind it themselves. So there's something strange here. Zhou Wen wasn't angry. After all, he and Sheng didn't have any good intentions. The heavenly robe wasn't as perfect as it looked. Without batting an eyelid, Zhou Wen circled the valley. After weighing the pros and cons, he planned on pretending not to know anything and continuing the transaction. As Woods wandered around Zhou Wen, his heart leaped to his throat, but he pretended not to care. He didn't rush Zhou Wen and Sheng. It had to be said that Woods was indeed a shrewd, wily old fox. He was extremely worried, but his expression remained unchanged. If not for Truth Listener's ability, Zhou Wen wouldn't have been able to see any problems. After all, even Sheng couldn't tell the problem, much less an inexperienced Zhou Wen. Mr. Zhou, Adjutant, is there any problem? Woods asked after Zhou Wen and Sheng returned. And Sheng looked at Zhou Wen. Clearly, he hadn't discovered any problems. He was very satisfied with the primordial crystal reserves and purity here, nor did he discover any potential dangers in the dimensional zone. Mr. Woods, you should know that I was born and raised in Guide City, right? Zhou Wen said with a faint smile. Woods' heart skipped a beat, but his expression didn't change at all. He said with a smile, I've heard of it. Guide City is indeed a land of outstanding people. To be able to nurture Mr. Zhou and such a primordial crystal mine, it's obvious that this place is extraordinary. Unfortunately, our Cape family's roots are in the West District. Otherwise, we would have come here to develop. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.